with Aaron Cairo
All
and
right, let's
Braille
see
has
how this works.
impacted them. And like I said, fill in some of the blanks when it comes to Scientology. So let's see, we're ready to go here.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so glad that you agreed to come on. I've been dying to talk to you and fill in some blanks. So I think this will be fun.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun too. And yeah, it's cool. Like I was watching, a bunch of your videos, and I think it's really cool, like all the stuff you've been doing. And like, I'm sorry to hear that all this negative stuff has kind of happened in your life. And I think it's cool that you kind of like taking the negative and trying to like do something sort of positive with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Part of after leaving Scientology, which I was in for 35 years with 3 generations of my family, 4 if you count my grandpa dad, but I can explain about that more later. It's you don't want to waste any time, when you want to kind of like when you get control back of your own life and you realize that you get to make your own decisions. My focus has become trying to do the things and focus on the things that bring me joy, and talking about and explaining Scientology so people understand why we say it's a family destroying human trafficking cult brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Now, for my audience, this is exciting because we have 2 very different types of audience, and I love when worlds can collide and we can bring those together. My audience has gotten a bit familiar with you because I've covered some of your videos that you've done about Braille. We've gone and looked at even you got a lot of YouTube channels, including The Boy.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, maybe I can give you just like a brief summary of me. So I originally grew up in Australia, just skateboarding. I love skateboarding. I love everything skateboarding. Then kind of in the sort of rise of social media is when I kind of like gained some popularity in skateboarding. I was more just in the local Australian level, and I would have some basic sponsorships and that kind of stuff. But then through social media, I really kind of gained a bit more prominence. Then I was kind of just doing some just for fun. Like I wasn't making a living from skateboarding. I'm just for fun, traveling and that kind of thing. Then I traveled to the US. Braille was already quite established in sort of skateboarding at that time. And I like met up with them. I'm like, oh, I'll meet up with all the big things in America. I met up with Braille and Barracks, which is also Scientology roots too. Just randomly. So random that 2 big things in skateboarding is Scientology. I really don't know why. But yeah, met up with them, filmed some videos, and it had success. And then when I went back to Australia, then Kyro was like, yo, you want to come and work full time? You did really good. Like, I'll help you get the visa and move to America. Then I moved to America. And then that's kind of when my Braille story began. And that was about I think 4.5 years ago, maybe almost 5 years ago.
Wow, that is a long time. And when you first went to work with Braille, from seeing one of your videos, you talked about how you knew that Aaron Cairo was involved in Scientology, and to each his own, right? When it comes to making if somebody wants to follow a particular belief system, but you didn't, I know then, and correct me if I'm wrong, like that kind of like the depth of his involvement, or at that point he wasn't established. I don't think.
So I guess I would say casually when I went, I kind of knew Scientology is bad, and at the higher side, all this crazy stuff is happening, I would watch the documentaries and, kind of because this is sort of 10 years ago, whatever, the Mike Rinder era when he's exposing them or whatever. I feel like I saw he did some stuff recently that I didn't really understand or whatever. But when he wrote his book and that kind of time period, that's sort of what I would see. But then at the same time, I was just like, okay, Aaron's doing this good stuff in skateboarding. He's just this guy. If he's a Scientologist, whatever, I just kind of was like, okay, he's donating to this thing. He's doing this thing in his personal life. It doesn't really affect the videos. So that's kind of that was my initial stance. And I don't know, I felt like that was okay. But then eventually it came to the point where the business was separate and Scientology, and then obviously it all exploded. Scientology was the catalyst of everything going wrong,
Yeah. So you were talking about your time with Aaron Cairo when you first started at Braille Skateboarding.
So yeah, I guess I was just thinking that the high up craziness that I had heard about, I kind of felt like that was a little bit distant from just I thought kind of just low level random skater dude that is in Scientology, I guess. And then I guess I kind of went on the long journey to figure out that, well, he's actually super high up and all this stuff.
Yeah. What do you think? What for you was there anything that happened or occurred that for you felt like a little bit of a red flag where you started thinking like, how deep is his involvement or Scientology, or is it
Yeah.
affecting things?
So when I first moved, I was like, this is, in skateboarding, like this was a good opportunity for me to sort of do something different in skateboarding and make a living from skateboarding and move to America. Like I completely changed my life from being in Australia, like not making a living from skateboarding, to move to America, make a living from skateboarding. So there was like obviously this big incentive for me to want to do it or whatever. But yeah, the first thing is when I first went there, I had like a meeting with him or whatever. And I knew like some of his kind of like behind the scenes non-skater people. There's kind of like two sides to the company, the skaters and then kind of like the business non-skaters. I knew some of the business non-skaters were also Scientologists. And then my question was like, who is a Scientologist? Like, are all of the people Scientologists or are the skaters not? And then I was asking about like the specific skaters, and he's telling me like all the skaters are not, these people are, I am, and we're friends and they're helping me on my business. So then that made me feel better if it was like, okay, these people have been doing this for a long time. They're not Scientologists and they're getting along. So like, it seems like it could work for me too. So that gave me a peace of mind. But then I'll say one thing that was a red flag, like your initial question, was when I first went there, I see this channel getting millions of views, 5 million subscribers. So yo, we got Aaron in the chat growing up in Scientology. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I see millions of views, all this stuff. And then I was like, Aaron's like, okay, yeah, we're going to film on Saturday. On Saturday, we're going to film 7 videos. We're going to post daily. And on Saturday, we'll film 7 videos. It's like, why are we filming 7 videos in one day? And then I come to learn like, oh, Monday to Friday, he must go to Scientology and work for Scientology. I was like, damn, like, I just remember thinking like, damn, you're really giving it that much time when like you have this channel, like, from the outside looking in, you see him posting every day. You just assume he's working on the channel every day. Like, then you're like, damn, like he's really just giving this everything. And the channel already at that point, he was giving the channel, he was like neglecting the channel, you know what I mean? Even when I very first joined. So that I was a little bit like, like that doesn't seem that good. And then, yeah, that was probably like my initial like, And then the main catalyst of everything was the business school arc. And like, I feel like we know we know how that went. When he left for 2 years, then really neglected the business, and we were doing all the work, and then it all just went down, and then it ended up in him closing the warehouse in such a bad, dramatic way. And like he kind of just, I really feel like he kept making bad decision, but then Scientology would like not allow him to like backpedal and apologize or do anything. He kind of gets in this bind where like Scientology forces him like not to do kind of like the right thing, I guess. Yeah. And then it just explodes. And I think Aaron, I'll try to say Kyro and then like Aaron Smith-Levitt, because it's like, how do I say his last name? Smith-Levitt?
Smith-Levin, Aaron Smith-Levin.
Yeah. Aaron Smith-Levin, I've seen him say is like Scientology's biggest enemy, like is itself, and it's like the rules and structure that it imposed, like even going away from 2 years from your business. Of course, the business is going to tank. Like, what do you think's going to happen? So yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, they're the interesting thing too, I think, when it comes to Scientology and Scientologists, and the thing that I try to remind people of, we talk a lot about on my channel, the harmful practices within Scientology. Most Scientologists get into Scientology because there's a problem that they want to solve, they want to do better in life, and that is an admirable thing. It's a slow boil though, of pulling you away from what you originally wanted to get out of it. And in Scientology, there are multiple steps that you do in order. They call it on their bridge. And you do one step and the next step and the next step. And as you go up, it becomes more expensive. And as you get further, you have to be more dedicated. And Aaron Cairo joining staff was a really interesting choice to me, because he really didn't need to, in my opinion. And because he had this channel going and he was doing a lot with Braille. But what happens in Scientology, the higher you go up, the more it's expected that you take on more responsibility in expanding Scientology. So my speculation and opinion is that he joined staff in Scientology because of that expectation. He has done a lot on Scientology. They call it their bridge to total freedom. And he has gotten up through what's called operating Thetan level 7. So the expectation that you're going to take on more responsibility gets higher. You also have to
Yeah.
prove yourself to Scientology and go, look, I've recruited this many people, I've done this stuff, so that you are allowed to do the confidential levels. So I think based on how you've described him, because I don't know Aaron Cairo, based on how I've heard people describe him though, I feel like, he started off with certain goals, but Scientology hijacked that. And that is often what happens in Scientology.
I mean, it kind of it almost seems like there's two versions of him, because like if you watch some of the old videos in the prime, he's just, whatever, nice, happy-go-lucky guy. And people say, Ricky, is he really like that in the videos? He's like, yeah, like we were friends. He was a nice enough guy. But then you even just like seeing the video of him in the Scientology clothes or like whatever, it's like, whoa, like who's that? Like, I don't know that person, And so it's kind of like what I found interesting too is, he's Scientologist, and there's two women that work there that were Scientologists. They would have like minor roles in the company, or three, sorry. And then there was a couple other Scientology dudes, but then all the skaters are not. But then whenever I would hang out with those other workers at Braille, and they were just whatever, nice people, I don't really have anything negative to say about them other than the Scientologists. Mm-hmm. When I would hang out with them, they would never say things like, tomorrow I'm going to go to the Scientology org. Never, ever, ever would they ever say anything like that. They would say like, oh, I'm busy tomorrow. Oh, I have to do this tomorrow. They'll never bring it up to me. I think of it kind of like Harry Potter. It's like, I'm the muggle and they're the wizards, and they're talking about like the wizarding world. And they would never say to the muggle like, oh, this thing. So I always felt that kind of divide. Whereas like Aaron would be a little bit more open to me. And like, if I directly asked him stuff about Scientology, he would say, and he'd go, yeah, I'll tell you whatever you want. Like, he was never like trying to hide it too much, but it was just the general sentiment that they would absolutely never bring it up willingly. But if I really pressed them, then they would maybe say like a tiny bit about it.
Yeah. It's very much part of this Scientology culture. You mentioned, him kind of never apologizing, right? And a lot of the backlash has been in his treatment of the people, the community around Braille. That is very much part of the Scientology culture. When you first start out, it's like, the honeymoon phase. You're being love bombed. There's some basic things you're learning in Scientology that is helpful. A lot of it is not because it came from Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, it's been well documented how much he stole from other religions, other philosophies. And then he added his own twist and he put his own stink on it and came up with Xenu and the Body Thetans and things like that. But it's part of that culture. There's nothing in Scientology. If you get in trouble with Scientology in the group, so say you do something that violates the moral code, in Scientology, you have to do what are called these ethics condition formulas. They're a series of steps to get back into the good graces of the group. None of it involves apologizing. What it does involve is you might have to, one of the steps, and this is word for word, deliver an effective blow to the enemies of the group one has been pretending to be a part of despite personal danger. So it's about making basically like if you're in Scientology's eyes, if Aaron Cairo is paying too much attention to skateboarding and the people that he works with, and it's taking away from Scientology, well, that's what Scientology would call off purpose or having other fish to fry. So he would be corrected on that. And as part of that, the damage that would have to be made up is to Scientology, not to anybody that he upset. Those relationships just are not valued because you're indoctrinated to believe that your mission as a Scientologist, as a staff member, is the most important thing in the world. And then you end up devaluing people and relationships because it's justified because what you're doing with Scientology is so important.
Yeah. I guess one of my big questions is, like I said, how I was like red flag when he's just going to Scientology, working on stuff, like he said. Like, what is he doing? Like, that's what I never really understood. Like now, maybe we can talk about now later, but like when he's just like a general staff worker rising through the ranks, like what is he doing at the org,
Well, he's the executive director now. So he is the head of Scientology in San Francisco. The organization, Scientology organizations like that exist per L. Ron Hubbard to sell and deliver Scientology services and to get people in to sell and deliver these services too. So a big focus of his would be on getting new people into Scientology. Now, I don't know how many staff he has under him, but there are different divisions in Scientology that handle different things, handles communications, that handles ethics, that handles getting new people in, that delivers the courses. As the executive director, he is over all of that. And there's a lot of pressure in Scientology basically to make money. So the gross income is a statistic that's monitored very closely in a Scientology organization. So getting money in for that organization is a huge priority. And he's basically over all of that. So there are mandatory roll calls. He had to have signed a 5-year staff contract. And the interesting thing about that is this is supposed to be a volunteer position. Scientology says these people are volunteers. They are religious workers. That's why we don't need to pay them. And that's how they get out of not paying them a living wage. People don't make enough money to live working for Scientology because you're a volunteer. Yet you're required to be at about 3 roll calls a day to make sure you're still there. You are required to be there, in his case, Monday through Friday. They put all these requirements on you. And Aaron, at Growing Up in Scientology, says it's well, Chief Wizard, that was his job. Or is his job.
But now that he's the executive director, is he getting like a proper wage? Like say if he never makes any more money from Braille, he's not getting a wage?
No, you might make a little bit more money than the average staff member, but generally these organizations, the vast majority of the money goes up. It goes to Scientology management. It basically ends up with David Miscavige, the dictator of Scientology. So they barely have enough money to pay their staff. So a lot of people who work for Scientology that way have to work another full-time job or have another side hustle to pay for their food, to pay for their rent. Now, he is, again, a Scientology staff member. There is a group above that, which is the C organization. And that's where Aaron Cairo spent a lot of time in Clearwater. And in the C organization, you sign a billion-year contract. You're 24/7. Yeah, you live in dorms. Exactly. With a B, because you come back lifetime after lifetime to do Scientology fitting. And that is the environment that Kyro spent 2 years in Clearwater. He would have been staying in a dormitory.
So with the CEOG, so I guess just like for the casual skate viewers too, from what I understand, there's 3 levels, right? Public Scientologist, aka random dude that does low level things and donates casually, kind of thing, right? And like that's kind of what I originally thought Kyro was. Then the staff member goes to the church, is actively trying to make money. So would something that the staff member do is like calling people, trying to sell books and like stuff like that? Like, would that be like some of the roles type of thing?
Absolutely. Recruiting people for staff. So having meetings with Scientologists or even non-Scientologists to get them to join Scientology staff to work practically for free. Growing Up in Scientology also says, as the executive director, San Francisco Day, on a good week, he'd be lucky to make $500.
Damn.
And that would be on a really good week. So you could be getting people in to do services, not just new people, but Scientologists who maybe kind of wandered off. There would be projects to get them back in. So you're on the phone, you're reaching out, you're trying to hold different events to get new people, to get previous Scientologists back into the fold.
And then the top is like the CEOG, right? Is the CEOG only in Clearwater? And like you said, Aaron trained with the CEOG, but he's not strictly a CEOG member. Is that correct?
Yes. The C organization exists in Clearwater, in Los Angeles, in other countries too. There are C organization members. A C organization member can also be sent to an org like San Francisco and have to work there. When I was in the C organization in my teen years, I got married when I was 17 in the C organization. Not uncommon, because in the C organization, you're not allowed to have premarital sex or touch each other in any kind of a fun way unless you're married. Now, that's only in the C organization. So you end up having all these teenagers getting married young, like I did at 17. Well, they have a rule in the C organization. You're not allowed to have kids there. Again, only in the C organization. They don't have the facilities. They never did. There were a lot of abuse and neglect that happened with young kids when they did allow them. And so in my day when I was there, I basically was put in a room and had immense pressure put on me to end my pregnancy because they would lose their free labor. And my husband and I wanted our child. We got sent to Seattle, which would have been an organization like San Francisco. So we were C organization members, but working in a smaller organization like that as punishment for having this child. So he would have been living with them though, or with other students doing the same thing, but in one of their motels where there's like several people in one room, there could be 2 or 3 bunk beds high. He would have, while he was there, he would have had very limited meal times at very set times, breakfast, lunch, dinner. There's a break from course from in the afternoon, but it's a very strict schedule.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that it was so like, that's really traumatic. I would say to Aaron, because I, you know, like I said, I thought Aaron's a nice guy at the time, whatever. I would say like, yeah, because I would hang out a little bit with his wife too. And I said, you guys should have kids. Like, it'd be sick. Like, you should definitely have kids. And Aaron was a little bit more like, yeah, maybe. But then the wife was like, no.
Yeah.
But maybe has something to do with their position on that. This was the question that I was really interested in, because sort of like the Braille would get a little bit of shit in skateboarding, and they'll say like, because we were kind of a little bit more sort of like a kids, more like kids oriented and kind of like more to newer skaters. Like, hey, you want to learn about skating? Come with us. We'll teach you how to skate. Oh, you saw us skating on a glass skateboard? Like, that's cool. Come learn how to skate. It was kind of like more targeted to kids rather than like super serious, like high level, you know, X Games type skating. That was like a little bit of distinction. And it was kind of like weird and quirky or whatever. Then Aaron would get really a lot of shit that they say, Aaron is using Braille to like get kids into Scientology, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's this one big conspiracy. And like, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that, is because what I feel like the Aaron Cairo story arc with Braille is that he's building up, he was a skater that loved skating pre-Scientology, right? And then he starts building his business, gets all this traction. Then in his life, he's parallel going up Scientology, and he kind of thinks they're related or whatever. Like, I guess I'm going to say, like, from your perspective, do you think he's trying to use Braille to get people into Scientology? Or do you think that's just, he's just living his skate life and he's living his Scientology life? Or what do you think he's thinking in his mind, you know?
I think that, you know, my speculation here is based on how you've described his behavior too, is, well, first, let me start with the Scientology perspective. What would be expected of him as a Scientologist, as a staff member? Yes, it's completely expected that he would use his connections through Braille to recruit for Scientology. Now, him as an individual, would he be down with that? I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like, based on what I've heard so far, that he really did that. Like, it was kept separate, but there's no way Scientology was not putting pressure on him to get people into Scientology through skateboarding. If that makes sense.
What I have interesting to add to that is that, like I said, like Aaron, you know, I like how Aaron Smith-Levin refers to, I gotta say Kyro. I like how Aaron Smith-Levin refers to Kyro as like a semi-celebrity, like, or whatever, you know, and with his semi-celebrity status, skateboarders would see that like San Francisco Scientology would like post him on Instagram or something like that. And occasionally that would happen, and then all the skaters would pile on and like and obviously like hate on it or whatever. And then after a while, you could see there was this big change where it was like they would never ever post him. They didn't follow him. They like, it was kind of like he said, "Hey, don't do that anymore." Another thing to that too is if you, I think now still, but even back in the peak of Braille, if you would comment like Scientology on the videos, the word is blocked. And like Xenu and OT and all the buzzwords is like blocked. I think now the word Ricky is blocked, which is fucking sad.
Yeah.
But all those sorry to swear, but all those words are blocked, you know. And then like I feel like that's, to me, that shows mixed signals. Like what you said, Scientology is probably saying, hey, use your business. Oh, you got this reach, use your business. Just chuck a little shout out in Scientology. Then it seems like Aaron's saying like, hey, I got this good thing going with skate world. I don't really want to mix Scientology. So like, what's your take on that, I guess?
It does seem like he was pushing back on that a bit, still trying to save his business, still trying to have some separation there between the two. And he would have been under immense pressure to not do that. From the viewpoint of Scientology, to say, oh, I want to keep this separate and don't post things about me in Scientology, they would see that as being what's called a potential trouble source, which is someone in the eyes of Scientology who's connected to a suppressive person. So somebody who is doing a lot of
Like
harm, or
us, right?
basically, yeah, exactly. And I left Scientology and then they excommunicated me. I'm like, I broke up with you, Scientology. That's how that happens. But they do that. They put
Yeah.
that label on you so that current Scientologists don't communicate with you. Because when you wake up as a Scientologist and you start realizing what's going on, that is contagious, and they don't want that to spread. So they label you as a suppressive person, so Scientologists can no longer speak with you and start learning that truth. So from the viewpoint of Scientology, him not recruiting or trying to keep that separate would be seen as a problem. Like, why aren't you yelling it from the rooftops? Now, having said that, there is precedent. If you look at Tom Cruise, when Tom Cruise was at the height of Katie Holmes, when he was telling Matt Lauer that he was glib, when he was going after Brooke Shields for her postpartum depression, when he was coming across, I'm this authority on psychiatry, that backfired and that hurt him. And he's really not done that since. He's not done a lot where being vocal about Scientology. So I don't know if Kyro kind of looked at that and was like, I don't want that to happen. And if
Yeah.
Scientology softened on it, but if he's not producing, he's not bringing in the new people and the money, they're going to interrogate him. He's going to have to go through a series of what we now refer to as reprogramming. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but he was just in Clearwater for L. Ron Hubbard's birthday event, which was interesting.
Yeah, I saw that little clip. I think you covered it too, where they go, Aaron Cairo.
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
then
oh man.
face.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess my big question is like, in Scientology, right? You're like trained to never Google, is Scientology bad? What is Xenu? Or like you're kind of like, from my understanding is you're never meant to look at the other negative side. You're just meant to say, I'm on the right track, everything's great, and never look at it, right? If I get declared an SP and Kyro is not allowed to communicate with me, he's not allowed to watch anything I do, right? He's not allowed to like basically think about me, really. Is that right?
That is the idea. So Scientology wouldn't officially declare you as a suppressive person, but it would be more because they do that to Scientologists. But
Okay.
they could refer to you as, he's an SP, he's a suppressive person. And then, yeah, he wouldn't be allowed to be on your social, to talk about you. You would have to be like non-existent, which is probably why you got blocked on all his channels. And part of that is they have this false idea that in doing that they can contain the cancer or what they see as a cancer, but everybody else sees it as the actual truth about Scientology and the damage that occurs. So he likely would be, disconnected from you. And when a Scientologist, in Scientology, it's called disconnection, where they just cut ties. It's not always, oh, here's a letter, I'm cutting ties with you. They can just do it and boom, you're blocked. But he would have all kinds of pressure on him to cut ties with anybody who questioned or brought things up. They just cut the person out.
Yeah. But I guess what I say for that is like, me talking to an anti-Scientologist person previously working for the Scientologist company director guy or whatever, do you think anyone in his sphere or something is going to like watch this and just see what we said, or they just go no and just pretend doesn't exist?
So the rule in Scientology, any Scientologist in good standing would not be allowed to watch my channel or my videos. I am an officially declared suppressive person in Scientology. So they wouldn't be watching it. Now, would they sneak it and do it anyways out of curiosity? That's possible. But if that comes up, they would get in trouble for that. Now, Scientology has this dirty branch organization called the Office of Special Affairs. They have people who watch, like growing up in Scientology, and I'm sure some of my videos and other content creators who are former members and officially declared as oppressive people, who their job is to kind of keep tabs on these things, and then they send direction. So somebody in Scientology might watch it and then go like, hey, you need to disconnect from this Ricky guy. But it sounds like he already did. So you're not allowed to read or watch anything that challenges the Scientology narrative as a Scientologist, because what will happen if Scientology finds out is you have to pay money to undergo reprogramming to get those blinders back on. It's all part of the mind control. And to keep those blinders on, you have to limit connection with anybody who questions the Scientology narrative.
Yeah. I guess that question kind of led into my next one, is that like, if Aaron Cairo went against Scientology and is secretly watching this to see what we're saying, and then like, what would be like your advice if he said, man, my business went to shit, skating's not what it was, all this negative stuff's happening to me, maybe this isn't the bridge to total freedom, maybe this is not good. If he realized that, like, what would be his path? Like, let's say he just said, like, actually, I'm going to try to quit. Like, what do you think would be his path? Like, I don't know if you know, his wife is also in. I think she's 10 years into Scientology. I'm not sure what her rank or whatever was. And I think she's also on staff. But like, if he suddenly decided that, like, what would be his plan, I guess? Like, or could we come up with a plan?
Yeah. So Scientology would immediately try and get him back to Clearwater, to get him physically in their custody so that he could start undergoing interrogations with the idea that they would change his mind. Everything is done to try to handle the person to not leave. He would immediately, they would likely put him on manual labor at the same time. When I said I wanted to leave the Sea organization, I was put under a 24-hour security watch where I was never allowed to be by myself. And because they don't want you just leaving and taking off, they will start to threaten him with the declare of being a suppressive person. Now, whether his wife would leave with him or not, that could be an issue. It took me 2 years to leave Scientology from when I decided I was leaving no matter what, because I worked hard to get out as many of my family members as I could. And I left with 3 generations of my family, which is unusual. So depending on how he did it, but he would immediately be in trouble. If he refused to go to Florida, which would be the smartest thing, if he really wanted to leave, just leave. You don't have to follow their rules, because Scientology has a series of steps to try to handle you to get you to stay. He would have to do that. And then they would start interrogating people around him to see if there's anyone he spoke to about this. You're not allowed to tell people if you have doubts about Scientology when you're in Scientology. I always like to say the number one first rule of Scientology is don't talk about Scientology. You can amongst yourselves talk about like your wins and your gains, but if you have doubts or you're questioning, you cannot verbalize that, or you will undergo what are called security checks, high-level interrogations, all to handle you. If he refused to go, they would probably do what they did to me, is because I refused. So they sent 2 Sea Org members out to my state to meet with me. They rented a whole like meeting room, and I took the meeting because for me it was closure and I wanted to kind of see the song and dance they did. They would send people to try and handle him. They would try and find out, who does he listen to? Who are his thought leaders? In Scientology, they call them opinion leaders. And they'll get those people to put pressure on him. Failing all of that, they might threaten him. Usually it's the threat of being declared a suppressive person because you lose all your connections. Now, the opposite side of that, I believe that Aaron Cairo will get a huge amount of support if he decided to leave Scientology, including from the former Scientology community. I work on a foundation called the SPTV Foundation, and all we do is help people who've left Scientology get back on their feet. Especially people who've left the Sea organization where they don't have a driver's license, they don't have a bank account. Many of them don't have an education because a lot of them had been in the Sea organization since they were teenagers, basically kids. So for Kyro, it would just be a series of trying to see what they could do to get him back in. But the smartest thing he could do is just completely cut ties with Scientology, not take their call, and walk away.
Yeah. But so, you know how he's executive director, he's probably all the time doing stuff, right? If he just called and said like, hey, I'm going to go on a skate trip to Europe. I'm going to be away from 1 week. That doesn't fly. Like, no way, right? They would say, hell no, you're not, kind of thing, right?
Oh yeah. No, they'd be hell no. That would be when you're a Scientology staff member and a Scientologist, what Scientology wants is you completely focused on Scientology and their mission. Unless it was a trip that would result in some type of acceptance of Scientology in another country, something like that. Purely for vacation, it just almost never happens. It's very, very rare because the pressure they put on you, they keep you in fight or flight. He's regularly told, we have got to expand. We've got to do this. The psychiatrists are taking over. They're infiltrating the schools. So you're constantly in this state of fight or flight.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, if I'm Kyro and I realize I want to escape, kind of like what you said, there was a 2-year lag of I'm getting out. Let's figure out how to do it. Let's say if Kyro was there, maybe he says, I'm going to do this new mission in this country. I've got a plan to start a new org. I'm going to go check it out or something. Then he goes, gets a few-day break, and then tries to like disappear. Would that really be like the way to do it?
Well, he probably doesn't need to leave the country to leave. You know, they're not going to let him.
Goes to Montana or something. That's where he's originally from.
Yeah, he would just have to go. Don't ask for approval. He will never get it, especially if they think that he is potentially kind of got one foot out the door. He would just have to actually do it. Just do it and don't listen to, what they say. One thing I think a lot of people don't fully understand is the level of mind control with Scientology. And it's not just them telling you, them locking you in a room, which totally happens, to try to handle you to get back in character. It is yourself. You're indoctrinated so that when you start having feelings and doubts, your Scientology training kicks in. You go, nope, don't look at that. I must have done something that's making me doubt Scientology. If you have doubts in Scientology or you question it, or you're saying, well, this technology doesn't work, their approach is, well, you have misunderstood words or you are committing crimes. They are convinced because L. Ron Hubbard said anyone who criticizes Scientology has crimes. You just have to find them out.
Yeah. Okay. My next one is at Braille. Like what I was saying is there was a few behind the scenes people that were all Scientologists. In skating, the skaters would always think that weird. Why are they all Scientologists? Why this? And from my point of view, I just looked at it as like, well, Aaron is spending all this time in Scientology. It makes sense that he's kind of like friendship circle is people in Scientology. So then when his business is expanding, who does he reach to? His friends. To me, that kind of made sense. But then it also seems a little strange, like what you're saying. I'm pretty sure all of them were on staff as well. They're working so hard, dedicated to the staff cause. Is it odd that there was so many people working on Aaron's business that wasn't really directly saying in the videos or anything, hey, join Scientology? Is that a unique situation, or is that like somewhat common?
That would be common if a Scientologist has a successful business and they're providing jobs, especially for other staff members. So them working for Braille was probably how they were making money to support themselves, because they don't make hardly any money on staff. So that would be supported because it's a business.
So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, that he would be supporting other staff members. And L. Ron Hubbard said that you flow power to power. So if Aaron Cairo is providing money to Scientology, we know he donated well over $1 million. Then you got to support that by helping him and backing him up so he can do more of that. And Scientologists believe that L. Ron Hubbard's management technology on how you run a business is the way to do things. And so you as a Scientologist, you'd want to employ other Scientologists when it comes to the actual running of the business so that you're on the same page. Because remember what Kyro did in Clearwater, this business school he went to, It was straight up administrative technology, how to run an organization, but per L. Ron Hubbard. And all you have to do is look at almost any Scientology organization to see that those policies and that way of running an organization does not work.
Yeah. Another question I had is like, this is old devil's advocate type stuff, right? But like, let's just say in Braille's time, it made like $5 million or whatever, all expenses and the tax and whatever. Like, is knowing how high and how involved Aaron is in Scientology, like, what is the chance? Like, I know Aaron owns a home, and in one of the videos he said he mortgaged his home somewhat recently, but he has this asset of the home. I don't know anything else. Like, knowing how high he's in Scientology and how deep he is in, like, does he really, like, could he really just straight up be like broke and like not have money? Like, is he really like, could there be a scenario where he's like really does not have any money right now?
100%. Absolutely. Very
Damn.
common in Scientology because all of the resources go to that. And because Scientologists tend to follow what L. Ron Hubbard says to do, it causes more trouble in their lives, which can result in more expenses. There have been multiple cases of physicians who are Scientologists, chiropractors, or dentists forcing their staff to take Scientology courses and then getting into legal trouble for that because you're not supposed to do that. So there's multiple ways where it could be costing him money, but primarily paying Scientology for all of those services that he did. And on top of that, given straight up donations is likely where most of his money is going. And that, again, is very common. I knew it was actually one of the saddest things in my mind when it came to Scientology and public Scientologists who were successful and had great businesses, but they really actually didn't have any money because they were so strapped in so much debt due to Scientology. It's refinance your house, drain your kids' college funds if you even have it, get rid of your IRA. I mean, anything. A registrar is a person in Scientology who gets the money out of you. And they will straight up say, hand me your credit cards. Let's see what your limits are. I'll call. We'll get them raised.
Damn.
They have a history of doing this. In fact, Chase Bank put the kibosh on Scientology and was like, no. Too many people then were doing refunds. And they're like, no, we're not doing it. We're no longer working with Scientology. So sadly, it is not uncommon for someone on the surface to look very successful, but behind the scenes be financially strapped.
Yeah. Damn. That bums me out because like the whole thing with his channel is like he was very much at the right place at the right time and he made some good decisions and he was literally kind of like 5-10 years ahead of the other sort of skate creative people. He had this huge advantage and Braille did do good things in its peak as a skateboarding channel, isolated, whatever. But like to hear that he kind of spent that, lottery ticket kind of is really sad, honestly. Like that kind of bums me out.
Yeah, and it would have been sold to him as, this is an investment, right? You go do all this training, it'll help with your business. If you do in Scientology, if we ever had an issue like, hey, I'm really not doing well in life, and I thought I would be rocking it right now because I've achieved their state of clear, they say, oh, that's because you got to do your next step. The carrot is always being dangled and the goalpost is always being moved. It's, because you need to do your next thing. So you got to pay for it. You got to do it. And at Aaron Cairo's level, the services he's doing, he can't even do in San Francisco. As if he is still on operating Thetan level 7, which is basically a level in Scientology where you are getting rid of these alien souls that L. Ron Hubbard said are attached to us, but can exist even on the moon. You use Scientology's e-meter to locate them, to free them. And every 6 months, he would have to go to Clearwater to basically do interrogations to make sure that he's not breaking any security protocols. These materials at that level, the confidential materials in Scientology, they take that very seriously. He has to have a safe in his house that is bolted to the ground or very almost impossible to move behind a locked door. And in that safe is where he would lock up his Scientology sessions that he does. And then he Yeah, you have to
What
strap
level does that happen?
It starts on operating Thetan level 3, where that's where you first learn about the galactic overlord Xenu. And for people who might not know, I'll just kind of briefly tell you,
Yeah.
Scientology believes that there was a galactic overlord named Xenu, and there was a problem with overpopulation. So Xenu took all of these people slash aliens, froze them in ice cubes, dropped them into volcanoes on Earth. And then when the souls of those aliens came up, they were caught with an electric ribbon, and then they were implanted with ideas about religion and Jesus and how you should have two and a half kids, white picket fence, and a dog, all of those things. And those entities attach to humans, and that's what causes all our problems. The thing is, your everyday Scientologist doesn't know this. You only learn this if you watch South Park or get to operating Thetan level 3 in Scientology. And from that point up, you are addressing these alien souls called body Thetans.
Yeah. When I was doing the stream earlier, my chat was asking me like you reached OT3, right?
4.
4? Okay. They were asking me like when they because you go and you read the thing, it's like a big deal when you reach it, right? And you've been working towards it, like you're excited. Like what was your initial feeling when you heard about that story?
When I read it, so on operating Thetan level 3, it's done. I did mine at the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles. It's at the blue buildings that you often see for Scientology in LA. And
that's where I am in LA.
Oh, okay. So the materials are in a pack, and it has a cord attached, and it's plugged in. This is all for security. You are in a locked course room. You take the pack off the shelf, and you have to go over to the table to study, and you got to plug it in so the alarms don't go off. If the alarms go off, that building locks down, shuts down, no one can come and go. And then you would get in trouble for setting off the alarms. So I remember I get my materials, I sit there, I plug it in, I open it up. And this is a big moment for any Scientologist that makes it that far, because you're told about, they call it the wall of fire. And it's this big mystery, and you don't know what it is. It's the confidential materials, because Scientologists, again, can't be watching South Park and things like that. When I read it, and when you read it, it's in L. Ron Hubbard's handwriting. They didn't retype it. He wrote it out by hand. They made copies of it in red ink on white paper. So you read it by hand, which is actually kind of hard to make some of it out. And I remember reading it. And honestly, it wasn't the weirdest thing I'd ever read, because in Scientology, even on the non-confidential levels and some courses, it is acknowledged that, well, in Scientology, they believe you live lifetime after lifetime. But if you're like, let's say you're in a Scientology auditing session, and you're talking, you got bit by a dog, and you're talking about that, right? Because you had all this pain or whatever. If it's not resolving, you go what's called earlier similar. So was there an earlier similar time you were bit by a dog? You could end up being like, well, 10,000 years ago, or however long ago, this dinosaur nipped at me. And your Scientology auditor, they're called, will not tell you that you're wrong. So when I was reading that, I'd already kind of heard L. Ron Hubbard talked about how we once were all clams. And as we were developing, lungs, the water coming out and going into us as clams is what causes anxiety. So it wasn't the weirdest thing. And when I did bring up some questions, what got told to me was, think about Christianity. If you knew nothing about Jesus and you just showed up on the planet for the first time, and people said, oh, we need you to drink the blood of Christ, and we want to tell you about this young lady who, this miracle of birth without an actual father, that would seem weird and odd. So this is how Scientology justifies some of the crazier beliefs that way, is, well, that would be weird. And they are right about that. If you didn't know about that, Christianity's been around for over 2,000 years, then you see that as odd.
I think I'm not sure if did you watch the whole Asmongold reaction, right? he kind of said a similar sentiment. He's like, yo, Scientology is only 100 years old. If it was 2000, would we view it differently or something? He kind of echoed that sentiment a little bit too.
Yeah, there's a little there's a bit of truth to that, but the bigger piece that he's missing is it's not the beliefs, right? If you want to believe in body thetans, and when I was sitting in that course room and learning about the body thetans and things, like, that's fine. The issue is with the abusive practices of disconnection, forcing women to end pregnancies they didn't want to end, locking people in rooms, physical abuse, mental, it just goes on and on. That's the issue.
Totally. My beautiful girlfriend is in the chat, Janice Spiteri. She actually went to the Olympics for snowboarding. So shout out to her.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah. Wow. Let's go, Janice. She says, does Aaron believe the downfall has nothing to do with Scientology and truly believes Scientology is making his life better? So I guess, like, is Aaron right now doing some kind of mental gymnastics that, like, damn, Ricky's against me. He's rallying against me. Like, I'm trying to do the billion-year work. Like, I'm trying to do the good stuff. Like, I guess what's your take on that?
Yes, because the expectation in Scientology, it's blame everybody else, hold everybody else responsible, not stop and think about how you actually treated somebody that resulted in these disagreements. Very much so. That's how they see it. And you hit the nail on the head. It is mental gymnastics. He would have to be twisting around how it is that way. It's going to conflict with his actual feelings about people. So what ends up happening, the further you go in Scientology, the further up you move, the more you get involved as a staff member, as he is, the less of you stops to show up. You don't show up so much as yourself. It becomes your cult personality, because you have to have a cult personality to survive in Scientology. And for people who Kyro, as I understand it, didn't get into Scientology till, I believe, he was an adult, a young adult, but still an adult.
I think he was early 20s.
Yeah.
And he was, at a low point in his life, not making much money kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's often, that's how they try to get you. Whereas people, like, I grew up in Scientology, so it's all I knew. I did not know anything different. So to me, this was just, yeah, of course, this is a normal thing. But as I got older, as I started interacting more with the world around me and people outside of Scientology, I started seeing, well, wait a minute. Actually, Scientology will say, we're the only ones, Tom Cruise will say, we're the only ones with the solution and the answers who can actually help people. That's not true. And I was seeing that. I was seeing people in the Red Cross, people in other organizations who were helping people for real. And many of the lies that were told in Scientology at these events, like L. Ron Hubbard's birthday event, I started finding out were not true, where they would say, oh, this celebrity endorses the way to happiness. Well, if you do some Googling and you actually check, you find out that's actually not true. They denied that had happened. That's why Scientology doesn't let their members read anything, watch anything that pushes back against Scientology's own narrative.
Yeah. So you said the SP title is more reserved for, like, past Scientologists that kind of speak against. Do you think my title would be the potential trouble source kind of thing? Or if they disconnected from me, would I be SP? Or, like, I guess one, my girlfriend wrote too, she goes, like, if we go to the Scientology Celebrity Center, like, if I went there and inconspicuously walked around, you think people would see me and be like, oh, that guy he's talking all these anti-Scientologists, blah, 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 he's against. You think it would be that dramatic, or you think I could walk around casually?
I think you could walk around casually, because they're not sending out photos or links to videos to every Scientology organization saying, keep an eye out for these people. They do with some, but that tends to be former Scientologists who are very active in exposing Scientology. And, you would be, if you walk into a Scientology organization and just, you have questions and curiosity, I don't see why they wouldn't. They're not going to know. They keep things very compartmentalized, because they don't want each organization to know that there are people out there who basically are saying that Scientology is a cult or sharing their experiences. But you could, because they're not going to know who you are because they shouldn't be watching. Now, what I love
Yeah.
about the skateboarding community and your channel is there probably are young Scientologists watching these different channels, and they are finding out the truth. They're seeing people who they respect and look up to questioning Scientology, and they have access to the internet, not people in the Sea organization, but younger people. And that's why I'm so excited about the skateboard community asking questions and trying to learn about this, because that's the only way we're going to inoculate people against cults and high control groups, is recognizing those signs and understanding, what it looks like. But I think you could walk into a Scientology organization, short of telling them, oh, I worked for Aaron Cairo, but I realized it was a cult.
Yeah.
There, you'd be able to do that. You wouldn't be doing anything. Don't break any laws, don't,
Yeah, of
if
course.
you were just being you, it would be fine.
Okay. My other question that I had is, on one of the last times I hanged out, like I filmed with Braille and Aaron before the disconnection stuff, is we went on a skate trip, and Aaron actually broke his foot. He broke his foot quite badly. That was like right on the cusp of like losing the warehouse and all this stuff. So like the timeline was like he broke his foot, then sort of like 2 weeks later, all this stuff blew up. Do you think that Scientology is like spinning it to him that the reason he broke his foot is his fault for being around me, being around these PTS people, me and Nigel and some of my colleagues or whatever? Like, is that what the sentiment would be? And maybe you could speak on sort of the perspective on that.
Absolutely. Scientology will use that as an opportunity to isolate him even more from his community. And I think Scientology has greatly underestimated the skateboard community, the meaning, the love that's there, the mutual respect, the love of the sport. I think they really underestimated those ties, but they would want to isolate Kyro from that by turning him against all of you. It's no different than what Scientology did with Nicole Kidman. When Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise were breaking up, Scientology, in fact, the guy who did it, who was involved with helping break up their marriage and turn the children against Nicole Kidman, came out as a whistleblower and said, oh yeah, we did that, and here's how we did it. That is what they do. They want to isolate him and get him to think it's your connection. Because if you get sick or injured in Scientology, the belief is that you are connected to a suppressive person. You are somehow being suppressed. And that is why we get sick and we make mistakes. Never just think about the stress he was probably under. I mean, if he closed everything down 2 weeks after that, he had to have already known if it was because he wasn't paying the rent and he was behind. That doesn't just come out of nowhere. That's known. There's letters that go out.
The main catalyst for closing the warehouse was COVID increased the rent price, and then the lease got renewed, and they bumped up the price like to a substantial bit. Then the business could have easily afforded it in the good times, but as the business was going down, then they couldn't really afford it. That was just the main general gist of that part of the story. But then it was more like, not that it closed, that he destroyed. Like, I had a locker there. I had stuff in my locker. Like, I had my possessions, because I would sleep at the warehouse, because I live in LA and the warehouse was in San Francisco. Originally, I was in San Francisco when I first moved. Then I moved to LA with my girlfriend. I would commute kind of thing, stay there for a few days, come back. And I had a locker with all shit in there. I hear from my friends, the warehouse is destroyed. They send me photos. I go there, my locker is just on the ground. Like, my shit is just in the pile of rubble. Like, luckily I didn't have any valuables. But it's like, yo, what the hell is this? Come on. It could have just text BRB, got to destroy warehouse.
Yeah. That's part of that mentality with Scientology, is it dehumanizes people. People in Scientology, they don't call them like your friends or people. They're terminals. So you have a terminal here that you communicate with. The language in Scientology is designed to desensitize people to just their human instincts. There's training and indoctrination you do in Scientology that starts in childhood. And even though Kyro did not grow up in Scientology, he would have done this training. They're called training routines, and they exist to desensitize you. And they would use language that would, again, not make it so he doesn't see you as a person or a friend or somebody that he cares about. they'll put heavy pressure on him. And it sounds like he was very overwhelmed and, really in a tough situation, but he still made the choice to lean into Scientology. I mean, just even by that act of not letting you get your stuff or putting it out in such a disrespectful way. And I saw videos by other people in your community and how they felt when that happened. That's so avoidable, but it's very much on brand for Scientology or a dedicated Scientologist to minimize those connections in favor of, well, what I'm doing is more important. I'm clearing the planet. That's more important. So if I upset a couple guys over here, that's okay.
Yeah, that does make sense. My other question is, so like now he got to the executive director position of San Francisco, and he got to OT 7, and like you said, you got to OT 4. I think Aaron Smith-Levin got to 5, was it? I think somewhere around there.
No, Smith-Levin actually did hardly any Scientology auditing. He didn't like it.
Oh, okay. My mistake there. Is it possible for Kyro to go from 7 to 8, or is 8 one of the ones where like you can't really get to? Because I know I've heard a little bit about how there's the fake 9 and 10 that they kind of like you said, the carrot in front, like, oh, we're gonna release 9 and 10, we're gonna, but then they don't. Yeah. Because I originally, when he went to business school, I thought he was going from 7 to 8, or I don't know, like 2 years. I would think it's like the best thing you could do, or whatever.
So you on operating Thetan level 7, it can take years. My mother was on it for years and did not finish it. A lot of people don't finish it because what you're doing again on that level is you're addressing these imaginary body Thetans. When L. Ron Hubbard was researching Xenu, body Thetans and all that, he was on heavy medication. I think it was phenobarbital, which causes your brain to feel like it's splitting into different directions, which makes sense. Oh, I've got all these, alien cootie souls all attached to me. It makes sense. So you are at that level. It's not just body Thetans that are attached to you, but they could be thousands of miles away. And you use Scientology's e-meter. They believe that when you ask yourself a question, like the dial will make a certain reaction. And then that's how you zone in on locating these body Thetans and getting rid of them. So if he's still on it and he didn't finish it, he can do operating Thetan level 8. He has to go to the free winds for that, which is Scientology's ship. Their little cruise ship. But there is no operating Thetan level 9 and 10. That is a big lie in Scientology, is that it exists and it is a carrot. They say that, well, we can't release it until we grow these organizations to be in a certain size. So that would have motivated Kyro to kind of contribute to that. And the fact that Aaron Cairo took on a responsibility like that, in my mind, even though it's misguided, it shows he does have a purpose to help people. It's just his desire to help has been hijacked by Scientology. And that happens to many people. Many people in Scientology are very smart, thoughtful people. They're there because they think this is the best contribution they can give to mankind. And their desire to help has been hijacked by a cult.
Yeah. And now that he's executive director, right? Some of my questions that I asked my community, they want to know is like, where does Kyro kind of rank in the overall picture of Scientology? So if it's like David Miscavige and then, sort of like the next people, where is Kyro there? Is Kyro kind of like a top 100 kind of guy, or is he kind of like a top 20 kind of guy, like, or top 1,000? Like do you have a general vibe about that?
Well, his title is executive director of the day organization. So San Francisco, like some other Scientology organizations, or org for short, as we call it, are split into 2 shifts, a daytime shift and then one for evenings and weekends. He is running the daytime shift, which tends to be often the larger of the 2 organizations. He also has this celebrity status. So he's not just your average executive director. In the overall scheme of things, there are a ton of people above him in the Scientology hierarchy going up to David Miscavige. But as far as public Scientologists go, everyday Scientologists who don't even fully understand the hierarchy in the C organization, he would be at the top because he's an executive director running one of these organizations, running one of what they call their ideal organization. So the building's totally renovated. And because he has his celebrity status, and then because he did this whole training program under David Miscavige, he would have more status in a way in Scientology. He'd be more recognizable. So it is a big deal for Scientology if Aaron Cairo were to leave.
Okay. So more because he's like you said, he's the staff executive director. He's kind of like this division. Then the Sea Org is more like the higher ranking division people, like the people at the top of Sea Org. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, wow, like a lot to unpack. When we first started the call before you went live, you mentioned your origins of skateboarding. And like, maybe does your community have any questions for me, or like, I'd love to hear your little relationship with skateboarding there.
Sure. I was born and raised in Hawaii, and I still have family there. I try to get back every year to go see my family. And growing up, it was, a big surf culture. And as part of that, some would skateboard. I never did. But as I would meet people in the skateboarding community, even in other places, like even in California, there seemed to be it reminded me a lot of the surfing community, because the surfing community in Hawaii was very tight knit. My father was a lifeguard in Waimea Bay on Oahu for many years. My uncle was a professional surfer in the 80s. And so there were always surfers coming. They'd stay at my grandma's house. She lived right on the beach on the north shore of Oahu. And so I got to meet these pro surfers from all over the world, Australia, other ones local from Hawaii, from California, and they would just rotate through during the season. And later on, like when I got to know more people from California, was when I met more people in the skateboarding world. I noticed like the culture is very similar, and I really liked that. Very close knit and very just chill. It's just a whole vibe, and which kind of got me excited about the skateboarding community recognizing, like, hey, Scientology, this is not a good thing. So pretty much it was more that, and being from Hawaii, the people, like I knew a lot of people who skateboarded as well, and those two communities would often overlap, but the big common denominator seemed to be just this sense of community and aloha was just so huge. And I've seen that, the videos that I've seen with you and other people who were at Braille, I'm like, wow, it's very similar in how those, communities are and how people want to help each other get better, but it's just a chill vibe. It's a real chill community vibe.
Skateboarding and surfing and kind of like action sports, I feel like they do have sort of a different sort of like subculture. Whereas if you compared it to like basketball or baseball, it's like a little bit more rigid and stuff. Whereas skateboarding is this more kind of like stronger ties to your identity or something, we could say. But that's cool. I just had a good question. But yeah, if you have any questions for me, I guess is cool too, or your community.
Yeah, I'll pull them up here. I've got a bunch of questions that are starred in comments here. Let's see. Dazed Vision says, used to watch the skateboarding channel years ago. Shame to see all the people that got screwed over by this. Yeah, Scientology does not tend to help things. Candace, Ricky, do you think you and the rest of the staff team would open your own skateboarding business?
Yeah, so we have the new YouTube channel called The Boys, where we're kind of basically just trying to do similar things to Braille, basically without Kyro. But then each of the guys kind of have their own channel too. I have my own channel and I do my like live streaming. I've kind of like positioned myself in this sort of niche area where like there's not really any skateboarding live streamers, and then I'm kind of trying to like pursue that. So that's kind of been my latest endeavor on my Twitch account is doing. And I don't just, do talking head stuff. I more do IRL skateboarding and like fun challenges. Like recently I did a challenge. I did the live stream for 8 days and I tried to do 1,000 different skateboarding tricks. And it was like really hard and really fun. And I made a recap video on my YouTube too. But I try to do kind of fun stuff like that too. But yes, we all are kind of like moving forward like that.
That's fantastic. Bodil says, hi, great to see the two of you together. I expected this kind of exchange about Scientology to happen when Braille collapsed, but I understand you all had much to deal with. And that's an interesting point of view too.
Natalie reached out to me like right when it was happening, I remember. And you go, hey, you want to do an interview? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I guess like my initial like pause and hesitation was like, how's this all gonna play out? Is like I didn't want sort of like, especially legal, any kind of legal repercussions. Nah, hell no. Like I'm not trying to deal with that, you know.
Yeah.
So I was processing emotionally. I was trying to emotionally process and just like, let's see how this all plays out. Now enough time's passed, I feel like emotionally I'm good. And then it seems like we had kind of this civil breakup or whatever. It's like they didn't really try to mess with me, and I have just been talking, but I haven't really done anything against them or anything either. So yeah, now is the good time. And all this sunny, it's funny to you and I have a little parallel. Whenever I see big creators cover skateboarding, I get really excited. I try to get involved. Hey, you want to learn to skate? Like, I'll collab with you. And then when you see big creator go anti-Scientology, you're like, oh, hell yeah, we're getting millions of views. Like, let's go. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I get excited. It's especially when it's reaching, you know, your audience is probably, I'm sure, you know, a younger audience as well, is being able to get the message out about what Scientology really is and how to recognize other high control groups like that. I think is where a lot of that value comes in. And it's sad when something like this happens because it tears apart a community, but it's such an example of why Scientology is damaging. And a lot of it comes from devaluing and not valuing those human relationships. We were made and raised to be more like very single-minded robots focused on a mission of saving the world at the expense of everything else. And that's where Scientology goes off the rails and that is how L. Ron Hubbard set it up, because he would make the most money that way, is it gets people derailed. They find out, what do you love? What are you doing? What do you struggle with? We're going to rub your face in it, show you how that's going to ruin your life, and then show you how Scientology can solve that for you.
Yeah. So in skateboarding world, there's this other guy that runs a skateboarding. It's kind of similar to Braille, a little bit more focused on the highest, best pros. It's called the Barracks. The guy that runs it is Steve Barra, and he's also like a Scientologist. What's I guess my take is like, from my understanding is like, you know how there's those public record things where you can see how high they went or whatever. I think he went clear. So to go clear, you have to be going quite a bit, right? But is it common that people in Scientology, so like I would say Aaron, he's 100% dedicated. All his time is working. He's doing everything he can at all times, right? But is there people that are just have like a casual like relationship to Scientology? Like, is it possible this dude went clear, then he kind of ran out of money or whatever, and he's like, I'm not going to go any further. I still occasionally do Scientology stuff, but now I'm just focused on my life. Like, I'm just more curious to hear about sort of like the different types of people that can be involved. Like, is that a possibility or not?
It is, and that's a great question. Scientology would call somebody like that disaffected. So they would try to handle them. But if they couldn't, especially if that person has any type of following or celebrity status, they're not going to want to rock the boat too much. Kind of like, you know, Neil Gaiman left Scientology a long time ago. The author Neil Gaiman, who's currently up on some very serious charges and allegations. But he has family deep in Scientology still, so he never spoke out about it. His former wife is probably still a Scientology staff member. So you can, and you see that happen. And what'll happen is that Scientologist will kind of pull away, but they won't say anything because they don't want to rock the boat. They might have family members still in Scientology, or God forbid, kids even in the Sea organization. And if you start speaking out of pocket about it, Scientology will cut your ties with those family members. And for some, their job depends on it. Because if you start speaking out against Scientology, that's a suppressive act in Scientology. It's very much against the rules. So people would have to disconnect from you. So if he did some Scientology, achieve the state of clear, especially if he did it a long time ago and he didn't do anymore. That's kind of a sign that may not be so gung-ho Scientology, but
Yeah,
might be being
I
quiet
guess I
about it.
don't know. I'm sorry to interject. I guess I don't know if he fully stopped or not. Whereas I guess, I had a close personal relation with Aaron. I see that he's actively going. Whereas this guy, from what I understand, is he doesn't actively go. But I don't fully know though. Either way.
Yeah, there are quite a few Scientologists who will do that where they're not very active, and it's usually because of those family ties. And to a degree, Scientology will kind of leave them alone as long as they're not connected to anybody who is speaking out about Scientology, or at least not that Scientology is aware of, because that's one of their biggest issues is they're so afraid of people like me, former members, people who, really have gotten a good education on what Scientology is, speaking to other people, speaking to current members, because they're falling apart. They have been for years.
Yeah. I did have another question is, are there young Scientologists? Like, is there a 22-year-old Scientologist that has an interest in skating that says like Aaron Cairo is the best? Like, oh no, it's so unfortunate to see these people spreading lies, whatever. I love Aaron Cairo. He's the greatest. Like, are there people that are just really like, would people in Scientology just like love Aaron Cairo and kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I feel like the answer is obviously yes. But yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I was curious as like when you were in the church, like how did you view these kind of like celebrity people in Scientology, like Tom Cruise or whoever else? Like, did you think of them really favorably and like, yeah, one of us is doing well? Like, I guess maybe you could speak on that.
Oh, yeah. I cringe to think about it now. But, growing up in Scientology, there aren't a lot of heroes in Scientology or people to look up to. You'd hear about celebrities like John Travolta and, of course, Tom Cruise being the biggest celebrity in Scientology. And it did lend this legitimacy like, wow, okay, somebody as successful as Tom Cruise is a Scientologist. And it's probably why he's so successful. A Scientologist thinks that way. So absolutely. And that's why Scientology tries to often fake support. They'll try and claim that this celebrity is endorsing their Truth About Drugs program. And they use what's called front groups, like the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, the Way to Happiness, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. These are all front groups for Scientology that their job is to go out in the community, create these relationships so that Scientology can recruit and have influence in a community. So definitely, I remember being in Scientology and thinking, oh yeah, I remember when Tom Cruise got his giant plate of a medal from David Miscavige for being the most dedicated Scientologist on the planet. And I was in Scientology then, and I side-eyed that. Like, seriously? I'd see Tom Cruise signing a billion-year contract, giving up, having children, having a life, all of those things.
Yeah, interesting.
I have a couple more. You pop in with any questions. I'm just going to grab some.
Yeah. Let's roll with this comments.
Okay, so let's see. Dazed Visions. New here, just curious, as a former Scientologist, does a South Park episode on it bother you or any other former Scientologists? I am not aware of any former Scientologist who's bothered by South Park. It was spot on. I have often said Scientology should use the South Park episode to explain Operating Thetan Level 3. They did such an amazing job on it that if Scientology were to let Scientologists watch it when they did that level, it'd be easier to explain than how I learned about it.
That's funny.
Yeah, reading it in L. Ron Hubbard's handwriting, it didn't make a lot of sense. And so they must have worked with people who had done the level because they did such a good job on it. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I will be honest though, I was a little afraid. So in Scientology, there is this belief, L. Ron Hubbard said, that if you are exposed to these confidential materials, if you are exposed to Xenu and body thetans before you are ready, that you will get pneumonia and die.
Yeah,
so when South Park came out, yeah, and when you believe that your entire life, even though you're like, logically, I don't think that's going to happen, but let's just wait and see if anybody drops dead of pneumonia. And nobody did. Nobody did. So I think South Park is great.
There's a YouTuber, he did a big thing on Scientology. He wore these glasses. You've probably seen Reckless Ben. He wore these spy glasses and like went into Scientology. But he's a funny guy. But he went out the front of the thing and he had a briefcase and was like, I got $10,000. Like, if a Scientologist says the word Xenu, they can have it. And like, they all just ran away from him and called security or whatever. But it's kind of funny.
Yeah, and a lot of Scientologists who haven't already done that level, they don't know who Xenu is. You're not allowed to say Xenu when you know what Xenu is. An everyday Scientologist might not even know and just go, okay, Xenu, like what even is that? They don't know. A lot of them don't know. And then what Scientology does, what they did after the South Park episode, is they say, you know, it's not the real operating Thetan level 3. It's an altered version of it. That's why mass amounts of people didn't die of pneumonia. So they discredit it and go, it's actually not the real OT3. It totally was. But they have to say that to explain why all the population of Earth who saw South Park didn't drop dead of pneumonia.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that might have been my first exposure to Scientology, to be honest, was seeing that on South Park. And I remember how it's on the screen. This is what they actually believe. I was like, no way.
Yeah. What did you think about it when you saw it?
I just thought I was like, is South Park joke? Like, is this a joke that like, how can this be real? And then, you know, you read the rabbit hole. Oh, Guinness World Record sci-fi writer. And then you're like, damn. And then, you know, there's that famous quote where he's like, oh, how you get rich is make a religion. And it's like, yeah, I thought you couldn't believe it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was completely true. Let's see. Eagle Eye says, hi, Ricky, just subscribe to your channels and da boys.
Let's go. Da boys.
Da boys. I love that name. I was talking to Smith Levin the other day. Well, he was pulling up the channel and I'm like, it's da boys.
Yeah.
Let's see. And speaking of growing up in Scientology, did Kyro try to explain why he was not able to or allowed to talk to you guys while he was at Flag in Clearwater? That's a great question.
Yeah, so this is a good question. The whole situation, you guys know that we had the meeting. I'm going to business school. It was crazy because the time when he said that and time left was like 1 week or something. It was very quick straight away. He goes, he says 5 months. He returns after about like 7 or 8 months. And when he initially left, they're like, all right, we're going to plan out how we're going to not have Aaron, like we're going to plan how he's not going to be present in the videos for so long. We're going to stockpile a bunch of videos and we're going to slowly release them. You guys are going to go on this trip and then the trip is going to be kind of the focus. So he had kind of like a business plan, right? But then when he came back, I went to dinner with him and he's like, how's it all been going? And I'm like, bad, terribly, bro. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're frying it. I was saying to him, like, this is not it. Like, it almost died then, and it's gonna, I said, like, the business almost is dying. If you go away again, it's gonna die. And then I said, if you want to go, you have to do it in a way where it's like, check in and like be involved and do all this stuff. And then he was kind of to the sentiment of like, yeah, you're probably right. But he didn't say, I can't because of Scientology. I can't this. Then I think Aaron Smith-Levin was telling me how he had to do it at night, which is crazy. I believe he said something to the sentiment of Scientology didn't want to show that the building was so dead. So they say to Aaron and I think it was like a few hundred people doing his thing, right? From my understanding. He would say to them, he would say, oh, yo, the thing's too busy during the day. You got to do it during the night. So you sleep during the day, all night you work, which is insane. But he didn't tell me any of that. He just said like, yeah, you're probably right. And then just didn't communicate at all. And then we're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. They would have put great pressure on him to, you cannot stop. My daughter was there doing a similar training program, not at the same time. She was there earlier, but you were not allowed. You have limited meal breaks. She would go from basically studying from 8:30, 9 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. Then she would get put into a call center to call people in Australia or on the West Coast, because this was in Clearwater, to sell them L. Ron Hubbard books. And that's not what she was there for, but that's how they were using a lot of the people in the training program, is they actually used them as free labor. She worked as a course room supervisor, which she was there to train as, but they kept using her, which then interfered with her getting through her own program because they don't have enough people. And when she would call me, so when she was in the call center was about the only time I got to speak to her. because she would call to try and get me to pay money. But, I would play along because I wanted to talk to my daughter. And it was a way that I could catch up. And then so sometimes I would like buy something small, right? So she could to stay on the phone with me because she was, doing her sales job. And then there were other times where when I was working on getting her out of there to go on this trip to Mexico with my ex-husband for Christmas, and the plan was to get her out of Clearwater and never send her back. She didn't know. I had to give her a false itinerary. So she thought she was going back to Clearwater because she was so brainwashed still. And Scientology started kind of catching on that all was not well with me and my family. And they told her at the last minute, no, you can't go. And then I had to have my former husband call, and we kind of did a good cop, bad cop thing. And then I was like, well, let me try and handle him. It's just all this stuff is paid. And then they ended up letting her go. Once I told her the truth, like, hey, once I physically had her in my possession again, and she was 18 then, and that's why I had to do it this way, because she was an adult. They would have sent her anywhere to get her away from me. I sent her a whole nother cell phone, told her it was for Christmas, but the truth is I didn't want Scientology having her number. Sent her to Mexico with my former husband. They still tracked her down and tried to reach her through Messenger on Facebook to convince her to leave the family and move in with a Scientology staff member so she could still do Scientology, because by then they knew that I was leaving. And I had to take extreme measures to get them to back off from my family. So I basically just used everything. I was raised in Scientology. I know all the rules.
Yeah.
And, they raised us to a lot of the work we did and the training they had us do from children well into adulthood was so that we could withstand a lot of BS and tolerate a lot of abuse because it comes from them. But what it also does is, you can also use that to stand up to them. And that's what I basically did to get my family out, is I used Scientology against Scientology. And my daughter eventually came back from Mexico, and it took some weeks, but finally then realized that, yeah, we were right about what we were saying about Scientology violating people's human rights. And she would tell us that she was made to clean bathrooms. She was deprived of sleep and food if she didn't make these quotas. She didn't see that as abusive. She was only there for a year. That's all it took. All it took. I didn't raise my daughter with full-blown Scientology. She started Scientology courses not because of me. It was in spite of me. It was actually my stepdad that would drive her to the org where she would do courses. So when she was there training, that's the same kind of environment that Aaron Cairo would have been in. If I wanted to talk to her, like, she would have to call to handle me. There was other people listening to the phone call to make sure she didn't say anything. And I just had to play along with that. So I'm sure it was the same thing for Aaron Cairo. There's no going off and making a private phone call.
Yeah. How is your daughter doing now? How long ago was this escape, when she was 18?
It was 15 years ago.
Okay.
She went to work for my brother-in-law because it was where she could get a job, but we could also still monitor who might be trying to reach her because they were still trying to get her back. And then I knew what I had to do to disqualify her for being at that Florida program that Aaron Cairo was on. And I did that, which basically involved threatening legal action against them. And all of this I knew because, I was trained as a Scientologist my whole life. Like, I know how to play the game.
Yeah, you can kind of use what you learned against them.
Yeah. And I was in the Sea Org, and I'm like, oh, I just like, there's very much this idea and this fear of Scientology that is really no longer the case. There's so many people speaking out and exposing it. What are they going to do? The internet completely has ruined them because the truth can come out. Now they're still going to try to, like, they send trolls. They try to, Natalie, and they basically come up with these lies about you to try and discredit you. It's lame, but that's all they can do because we're telling the truth and they know it, which is also why you don't see them suing any Scientologists. Not anymore. They learned their lesson.
It kind of seemed like the internet age, maybe kind of right around that South Park time, is where they sort of like gave up. They're just like, oh, we can't really contain it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Poof is saying, please tell him you have a grandpa dad. So my mother married a Scientologist. This is how I got into Scientology.
Okay.
My mom married a Scientologist after splitting from my dad. And that's how we got into Scientology. Several years in, she divorced him and married my grandpa, his dad. So the only grandparent that I actually had, because my mom had cut ties like with my dad and was keeping us away from that family for about 9 years. And so my grandpa became my dad, my stepdad became my stepbrother, my aunts became like my sisters. So when I refer, because my mom was married 4 times, I have like my dad, my stepdad, and then grandpa dad. We didn't call him that, and he was like the cult leader in our family. He was the most senior Scientologist. He talked Scientology all the time. But that's the whole kind of grandpa dad story there.
Yeah, wow, that's hectic.
I know, it's crazy. It's not even the least of the craziness. When I started my Scientology indoctrination, I was about 9 years old when I seriously started it, because I was in Hawaii with my sister. My mom was a Scientology staff member, and we were 7 and 9 years old, and she would be on staff in the evening and weekends. So I was always trying to make a buck. So we would draw these drawings and then try to sell them to make money for candy. And the Scientology org people told us, you can't do that. You can't start a business on Scientology premises.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm 9, but okay. So we took our business to the street, and I went across the street and started selling these images to a security guard. And this went on for a while. And then my mom one day was like, you are in huge trouble. We cannot go back to the org. And I'm like, what happened? Like, I don't understand. Well, the person we were selling the drawings to and hanging out with was Mark David Chapman. So a few months after that, he went to New York and he murdered John Lennon. So then real lot of parental supervision going on there. So the FBI was investigating and then interviewed my mom, because I don't know if through cameras or how they knew, but they would see my sister and I going back and forth and talking to Mark. We knew him as Mark. He was weird, but he was my best buyer of these crayon drawings. And
what the heck? That's great. So, sorry, where was he when you sold the drawings? In the org?
He was a security guard at an apartment building across the street from Scientology. Mark David Chapman lived in Hawaii prior to murdering John Lennon. So when that got investigated, it brought in the FBI, and that spooked Scientology, because this was 1980. And in the late 70s, the FBI, mid to late 70s, the FBI did one of the largest FBI raids ever on Scientology. Like, of any raid they've done. They did it in DC and they did it in Los Angeles. And it was that raid where they discovered all these documents showing that Scientology had infiltrated over 136 different government agencies. Like, these people don't mess around. They put Scientologists in jobs where they were stealing documents from the IRS and different government.
Yeah, I heard a bit about that.
Yeah, and then in the raid, it got found out.
Do you think Scientology will ever lose its tax exempt status in the US?
I hope so, but I'm generally an optimistic person. But on this, it's just like, when I look at all of the truth that has come out, the testimony, the firsthand accounts of the level of abuse within Scientology, yet they still have their tax exempt status, it just makes me just lose hope. I mean, but then that hope kind of comes back, because today, with social media, with YouTube, with having a platform to be able to actually like explain to people, this is the truth about Scientology. These are the things that they've done. This is why they're seen as a dangerous organization, that maybe then that can change. Because a different thing today from years ago is there are so many people never in Scientology, but all in on ending this cult, who are supporting people like me, former members. They're sharing these survivor stories, and cult experts say that is the way to get the word out, is to raise awareness through these survivor stories. So I have hope, but I don't feel like, oh yes, absolutely, because I can't believe it hasn't already been done. It's insane.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Yeah, I mean, I guess like the exposing the light on all the darkness, and now in the internet age, it's like the most powerful way we can do it now, I guess.
Yeah. And the power comes from all of the people never in Scientology. The former Scientologists were a small number of people, relatively speaking, because Scientology never had the millions and millions of members that they claim. But it's all of the people who are willing to go, hey, I'm going to share this video, or I'm going to share it with even like people at my city council or government, or just share it with people who can then learn. Here are the like, if you hear my story or the stories of other former Scientologists, and you start seeing red flags in another high control group, or you'll recognize Scientology because they have front groups where they pretend they're not Scientology, then, that's a good thing. I've got, let's see, let me pull another question here, or comment. Growing up in Scientology, in one of your videos, you said that when Kyro told you all he was going away to flag, someone else was there with him who he wanted to make the announcement. Was it someone else from the org?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you go on Reddit, there's if you Google like Braille skateboarding Scientology Reddit, I think there's a thing that lists all the people's names. That she was kind of like the accountant of Braille, and like sometimes acted like the sort of like front CEO, but Aaron would still do everything, but her title was CEO. But yeah, her name was Devin Weber. And from my understanding was that her parents were pretty big in Scientology. And earlier when you mentioned the handcuff to the briefcase, I think not me, but some of the other skaters at Braille, they saw her in the act of a handcuffed briefcase, and they're like, "What the hell? That's crazy. She's got the documents." But yeah, that's who that was.
Yeah, he's also saying Scientology executives have to be able to scream at people. Did you ever see Kyro scream at anyone at Braille?
Good questions, but honestly, like, not really. I mean, Aaron gave me the vibe of like, he was nice and friendly to me, but maybe he would be maybe a little more like slippery, and maybe he would convince people of stuff or something. But he was never the kind of guy to like get aggressive and get mad. It's like, if you told him something that displeased him, he would be very reserved and be like, let me think about this, rather than like, yeah, you're doing this wrong. So yeah, he never like yelled at the team or anything that I ever saw.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, they do drills in Scientology to get people to do things. Like, you drill it over and over and over again. In fact, Aaron Cairo would have done this drill where there would have been people sitting at a table, and his job would be like to take something and say, hand it to Joe and say, Joe, you give this to Susan over there. And then they would try and not to do it. And the whole purpose of the exercise is to be persistent in getting people to do what you need them to do. There's a lot of techniques that he would have learned in his training to get people to comply. Now, based on what you say, and I've heard from others, he sounds like a little bit of a softie, which is a good thing, but Scientology will work really hard to turn him into a little mini David Miscavige. And David Miscavige is a complete and utter dictator. And that is their goal. That's what they're
stuff that sorry.
Go ahead.
From the stuff that I saw, I would always see he's yelling and hitting him and whatever and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, yeah, Aaron was definitely not like that.
Yeah, which is good, which gives me hope that maybe he's not going to stay long term, because it's not really in alignment with his basic personality. And, and I was like that too. My time in Scientology, like, I just didn't vibe. Again, I'm from Hawaii, we're like,
Yeah.
live aloha and Hakuna Matata. Like you can live and let live. And that level of control is not something that was organic in who I was, even though I was raised in Scientology. Fortunately, after a while, I still spent time with my family on the North Shore of Hawaii, which kind of I felt like grounded me more in maintaining that spirit of aloha and not going full blown, psycho crazy Scientologist.
Yeah. I kind of never really thought of Aaron leaving, but now to see his business to like literally go to zero, and that's why I asked how much is he getting paid. If he was getting paid a livable wage, I would say, okay, maybe he just pretends that Braille didn't exist and he just lives his Scientologist life. But if he's not making anything, maybe he really can reach the breaking point to say, holy shit, everything bad in my life has come from this. Maybe I should evaluate it.
Yeah, because eventually that is what they're going to present to him. It's going to be that, well, he is the one, he didn't handle this or that, and that's why his business isn't doing good. Not just, he would have people directing him even on what to do. And it sounds like I get the vibe that they kind of push him around and that he just can't stand up to them and say, so he just goes along with it. And that is common as well with some Scientologists, like they don't want to push back. And I'm hoping that he does eventually do that.
It does kind of seem like that's his personality. Even as like the leader of the channel and stuff, he was not that good at saying, you do this, no, you did it wrong. You do this, no, you did it wrong. It was always kind of like more free flowing and like you said, maybe a little bit too nice and not like structured enough.
Yeah, which to me is a sign that he's probably not a really good Scientology executive. Because to be a good Scientology executive, you have to be very hard and very decisive.
Yeah,
and very,
I would agree.
You have to be willing to go into those uncomfortable spaces and have those uncomfortable conversations to force compliance to whatever your orders are. And he's getting regular orders from Scientology management on a weekly basis on what to do in the organization there in San Francisco. And if it doesn't get done, well, then he gets investigated. They look more into him, which then opens the door to, well, are you spending too much time on skateboarding? Like, is it taking away from your focus on Scientology?
Yeah. I feel like he might be at that point now that it's not making much money. I don't know if you see the views and stuff. It's all inflated with the Sunny V2, but before that, from averaging like 100,000 views, now he's getting like 2,000 views. Like it's really in the dire state. I was reading some of the comments and like how you just go and you heart some comments. None of them were hearted because there's zero like positive comments. It's like, whoa, like damn.
Wow. And you would hope that would be something that resonates with him. Like you can't, because he's got Scientology in his ear. That's the problem. He has Scientology in his ear and up his butt.
I see that in the comments too. They're like, don't believe the false misinformation being spread or all this stuff. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, for the record, I would absolutely welcome Kyro to ever talk to me in any capacity. But like, obviously he's not going to do that, but I absolutely would welcome him.
Same, absolutely same. He would get so much support in the former Scientology community because, again, this is not about targeting or being against Scientologists. For me, it's about the abusive practices within Scientology and the people who actively perpetuate those abuses. But there are so many people in Scientology like Aaron Cairo where people will tell you, no, that person is a nice person. They had this purpose to help and do well, and it just got totally hijacked by Scientology. And those people tend to burn out because you just can't handle that level of stress and cognitive dissonance that's going to occur because he is so tied as the executive director to Scientology. I mean, he is like a marionette puppet at this point. Like they are completely on him like white on rice, and they're watching him closely. And all of this backlash with Sunny V2's video and all of the reaction videos, Scientology knows about it. And, how do you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And that's why I thought it was interesting. He was in Clearwater for L. Ron Hubbard's birthday. And I was wondering if they were doing any type of correction or preemptive brainwashing so that when he goes back, that he doesn't fall into this trap of thinking any of this is his fault.
Yeah, I asked Aaron Smith Levin in his chat if like he's in trouble because this all happened, whatever, 6, 8 months ago. And then now that it's getting all the attention, like, would he be in trouble that it's getting all the attention? Whereas, like, he can't really control it now. He could have controlled it back then, I guess.
Yeah, that's true, actually. One thing to think about too is, like, does anyone know anything really about his wife?
I mean, I spent a little bit of time with her. I guess this is maybe an interesting story for the anti-Scientology community. I went to dinner with him and his wife one time, and they said, "Ricky, you got any questions about Scientology? You can ask me. You can ask me." Also, let me know in the comments, what would you ask if someone said that to you? Like, what kind of questions would you ask? But I said to his wife, I said, "How does it feel when you go on the Braille video and it's just happy skateboarding, whatever, and you see comments, oh, I hate Scientology, Scientology's evil, this Scientology's the worst, blah, blah, blah." I said, how does seeing that make you feel? And then she said something to the sentiment of, I know what I'm doing is good work. I'm literally saving people. I'm saving the world, blah, blah, blah. She kind of said something to that effect. But that was my question. Because obviously I'm not going to say, oh, Xenu, whatever. Like, then even I know that would have been extremely problematic. So in that scenario, I don't know. I was curious on that, though. That was my question to his wife. But yeah, I think his wife is also in the church and is also working on stuff. But I don't know too much else. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So she would be a resource for Scientology, especially depending on, her ties or family ties to Scientology. Because if he starts thinking about leaving, like, let's play out that scenario. She's either going to leave with him, or she's going to leave, he's going to leave and they're going to split up, or she's going to try to handle him. The reason why, in what little I know about him, I feel like Kyro is not one to take a strong stand, and that they'll just continue to bully him into continuing down this road. And I don't know how bad it's going to have to get for him to be able to realize that he just has to say, enough is enough. Like, your business is in shambles, your relationships. That's what blows my mind too. The relationships that have just been cut off is ridiculous.
Yeah, and even I think when he's doing his training, him and his wife are fully separated, right? Like, he's not hanging out with her. She's working in San Francisco and he's in Clearwater. And, like, to take 2 years apart with your spouse barely communicating, like what I'm saying, he's not communicating with his business or his wife barely. It just kind of shows how, like, dedicated they both are to the cause,
Yeah, because they believe it's this higher purpose. When you have the weight of the world on your shoulders because you're saving the planet, I mean, that's a lot of pressure. And it's part of what many former Scientologists, especially former members of the Sea organization, some struggle to let go of. This idea that you're on this mission and it is your job to correct other people. Because in the Sea organization, you're told we are the most ethical group on the planet and we exist to get ethics in on the planet. In other words, it's your job to go around being a Karen and telling people what they should be doing. That's a huge part of that belief. And then it's basically extremism. Any religion or high control group, you can have people in almost any religion who are kind of like, okay, just day to day. And then you have extremists. Scientology, in my opinion, breeds extremists, takes it to an extreme, and that's where they get in trouble.
It's like funneling you towards the extreme people, like, for you to become the extreme.
Yeah, but I don't see him, like, it seems like his personality type is not conducive for that. But what ends up happening with people like Aaron Cairo is then they'll continue to put up with the bullying and the pressure because they won't stand up to Scientology. They won't stand up to the people who are putting pressure on him. There's no way I can imagine where he doesn't have some doubts just with everything that's happened, and that he wouldn't feel pain or loss over losing these relationships. I just have a hard time. Again, I don't know the man, but based off what you've said and others, but he can't voice it. He can't tell anybody in Scientology, I miss my friends. I miss my community.
He got literally no one to talk to, because he can't even say that to his wife either. He can't even confide in anyone. And that's why I do have a lot of empathy for him, because I feel like what you said, he probably didn't like, obviously he didn't want to destroy the warehouse, but the business went bad. He didn't want the business to go bad, but he thought he had to get to the next level for 2 years. But yeah, like that's sad to think that he's under all this pressure and he literally has no release, no person to talk to. Maybe he can talk to ChatGPT and say, help me, let me vent my problems.
Yeah, that is a problem, because if you voice those doubts in Scientology, you end up doing more interrogations, and he has to pay for those. So he actually has to pay money for somebody to interrogate him on a Scientology e-meter to find out what his connections are, or you're just so made to feel that it's your fault. You're not, it's never because of Scientology. It's never because, well, my Scientology beliefs, I ended up practicing that and it made me treat people like crap. You don't realize that until long after sometimes that you leave and you realize that that's actually part of the brainwashing. A cult wants you isolated. They don't want you having all these relationships. And that's the sad thing, is Scientology just isolated him even more so.
Yeah.
Lost you, all of those other guys that were there. What does he have now? He's even more in this echo chamber of Scientology. And I would hope that, I don't know how he would know that, like, if he did make the decision to leave, he would get such a huge amount of support. I think it would completely bring back his channel, because
Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah, the redemption arc is possible for sure.
Exactly. How do you think the skateboarding community would respond to that if Aaron Cairo were to leave Scientology?
I mean, I think overall, like the hardcore Braille fans, I feel like they would, I mean, some will have no empathy, but I feel like some definitely will have empathy, and they'll be more like what we're saying, that life is a nuanced thing, and there's all these other factors. I think he would really have to fully like leave and go against Scientology and like all that kind of stuff. If he tried to like half-heartedly do it or whatever, even if he left and then like didn't really publicly talk about it, I don't think it would work. But I think if he left and then said, like, I've been fucking up this whole time, and then really went around it, then yeah, I think it's possible. Some of the more people in skating that, skaters that don't really care about Braille still hear about all this. They might just be like, I've heard enough of Scientology, Aaron Cairo, I don't care at all. But I think overall people would be receptive to it.
Yeah, I think we have is this your beautiful fiance?
Yeah. Shout out Janice.
Love that. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
There was a comment here, Mariko. If Aaron Cairo's business has taken such a downturn, would Cairo's value diminish, thus this cult's treatment of him worsen? So if the money dries up, that is a problem for Scientology. They're still going to hold on to him. And the very sad thing to me in my mind is you look at someone like Aaron Cairo, started something from nothing, built this out, got success, misguidedly thought it was because of Scientology. So put lots of money into Scientology instead of putting that money into his business and truly himself and his people. So if that continues to dry up and he no longer is a big donor for Scientology, they will still bleed him dry by his time, using him as a staff member, using him as somebody to recruit other staff members. I don't doubt, I would highly, highly speculate that they have him tap in to recruit young people for Scientology, because they're having a very hard time getting second, third generation Scientologists to sign on to this insanity because of the internet.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, why, Ms. Diva, why do you think he was promoted to his current position? He doesn't have the personality. For Aaron Cairo being the executive director, they probably thought, hey, he's got this great following. It'll lead a bunch of people into Scientology. And honestly, they don't have a lot to work with. There aren't a lot of people like, hey, I want to sign a 5-year contract and work for free. Not many people, even Scientologists, want to sign up for that. Let's see. There was a couple more questions here for you. Adeline, yeah, Aaron Cairo's wife is at the San Francisco org. That is where she is on staff. Let's see. Poof91 says, I only know Kyro through SPTV and Ricky on YouTube. Don't get me wrong. I'm 100% behind those at Braille that he's abandoned and hurt, but I'm starting to feel sorry for him too. Cult of Scientology took everything. Absolutely.
I think that's, yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that's a good approach. I keep saying to my audience, it's not black and white. I'm the hero, he's the villain. It's this shade of gray. And it's like, I think you should look at it with some empathy for sure. You know, you can't just say he's awful, he's a villain.
Completely. I completely agree with that. And that is the case for many people in Scientology. They are still victims. I interviewed a psychologist the other day, a few days ago on my channel, and he spoke out about Scientology at a city council meeting where they were trying to pass this L. Ron Hubbard Day. And he responded from the viewpoint of a psychologist and a legitimate professional in mental health to some of the beliefs and practices in Scientology. And one of the things he was very clear about was that, you know, we really need to do our best to still have empathy, because many of these Scientologists are victims of the mind control, are victims of Scientology. And you're not going to reach them by yelling at them or screaming at them or just telling them nonstop that they're in a cult and they're stupid for being there. That doesn't help anybody. That actually makes them double down on their beliefs, because they're being told that the outside world is bad and that anyone who questions Scientology is a suppressive person. Oh, here's a good question from Club Brain Fog. And Club Brain Fog, by the way, is a YouTube live streamer who's almost always outside San Francisco Scientology.
Okay, yes. I think that's the one is that the one that saw Aaron in Clearwater?
No, that was on Feral Cheryl on the Loose.
Okay, yeah. There was origin why it's called Braille skateboarding. In my understanding is in skateboarding, it really kind of depends how you feel on the day. Sort of like if you skate good, maybe you're having a good day. If you skate bad, maybe it's something comparable to like writing a story. Some days you're gonna have a lot flowing. Some days it's gonna be writer's block. And he just said, oh yeah, it's always about feeling. So it's like when Braille, you read Braille is doing this. So it's meant to be like I'm feeling it was his thing. Oh. People always conspire too that they go, Braille is blue and Scientology is blue. Is there a connection? Like, I personally don't think there is, but people always conspire about that as well.
Yeah, you got to find the little connections there. What do you think why do you think he was, we did that one. Professor Kakan, who I believe is a former Scientologist, staff get security checks, assume they still invoice with a promissory note like auditing, fake psychotherapy, spiritual enlightenment. Yes. So through some of his interrogations, he could be signing what's called a promissory note. If he leaves staff before his 5 years is up, he has to pay all the money. That 2 years of training that Aaron Cairo did, every time he did a new course, he signed something that basically said, if I don't fulfill my contract, I will pay this money back. Now, it's not legally enforceable, but it will prevent him from maintaining his good standing in Scientology. It's called a freeloader debt. And for some Scientologists, that's part of what prevents them from leaving, is this false belief that they really will have to pay back all that money. Yeah. And they don't. You can't get someone to pay for it, their own training for their job.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions that are popping out at you?
I mean, I think we covered a lot. Like, I think overall that's pretty good. You're like about to start another live stream? I saw on your channel, right?
He canceled. He's got to reschedule.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
This is a good question. Just real quick. Thoughts on Devin Weber opening a new mission in Mickmanville? Now, Liz, who's Devin Weber? Is Devin Weber in the skateboard world?
So Devin Weber is the CEO lady of Braille Skateboarding. So this is interesting.
Oh, so Devin Weber. Okay, so this is in Oregon. Liz Gale has been there. Liz Gale is a former Scientologist, third generation. And she has been to this Scientology location. In fact, they call it Baby Blue because it's like the blue buildings in Los Angeles. That is interesting. So Yeah, that would mean that person's opening their own Scientology organization. That's dedication.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn more about that. My chat is saying like, what's a mission? A mission is like
Oh,
a
okay.
mini org.
Yes. So a Scientology organization or Scientology org, they deliver up through the state of clear in Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard said every Scientology organization should have 10 missions around it, which basically is a mini org. They are only allowed to deliver a certain amount of Scientology services. So they're supposed to be recruiting in all these people and then sending them to whatever the local larger organization is. Then that local larger organization like San Francisco, where Kyro is, sends people up to the advanced organization of Los Angeles or another one that's in LA or to Clearwater. So that the missions basically get in the new people, the idea is, and then push them up through the top. But it rarely ever happens. I've never known an org to have a whole bunch of missions around them, even though L. Ron Hubbard said you're supposed to do that.
How would they get the money to open that? Would it be from her money or would it be from Scientology's money, or like how would they figure that out?
It'd be her money. You have to buy. It's like you buy into this mission franchise. It's like a franchise.
Damn.
So you have to then pay a percentage of what you make to like the mother church, if you think of it that way. But they retain more of what they make in missions, is as I understand it, as compared to an org. An org, it's like, again, the more you move up in Scientology, the stricter and the crazier it gets. So a mission might have a little bit more leeway in terms of schedules, where a Scientology org is boom, this is the schedule and that's it.
And you
But
said
yeah,
it gets people to the state of clear.
yes, Scientology org does, but a mission could do introductory services. And then when that person is really on the hook, then they send them to the org to start working toward achieving the state of clear.
Okay.
Liz says that Devin has joined the City Chamber of Commerce on behalf of the mission of Scientology. It's kind of a small town.
Yeah, this is like, it's sad for me because, like, you know, I went to Devin's house in Oregon with a husband. They barbecue up some like steak for all the Braille guys. Like, it was a great time, you know. So it's like, damn, that seems really that seems like a pretty aggressive action, right? To do that. That's like kind of a unique thing.
Yeah, very much
to open the
so.
mission, right?
It's
Yeah.
huge. It's a huge financial commitment. You know, it's a time commitment. It is something that would be, you know, there is a big push, it seems, where they're trying to do more of these missions lately. And Liz Gale's been out at that one multiple times, and I'm sure she'll be out there again. She's been out there actually protesting outside. And she said that like they don't see anybody coming and going.
I'd be very curious to learn more about that. Because you know, I would talk to Devin a lot through Braille. Honestly, she was always quite nice and helpful to me and stuff.
Yeah, well, Liz Gale is out there. Liz Gale here on YouTube, and I don't doubt that she'll be out there again. That's what she said. I apologize in advance if this subject has been covered. How did Kyro get into Scientology? Connections with Jason Lee, his wife, or another way? Do you know? I actually don't know.
Yeah, the official origin story. I think Kyro has an episode on Scientology TV, and you could watch it. I think it's 40 minutes, where it's like how the origin story of Braille, how we got into. Honestly, mainly it's about Braille, and then for like 1 second he says like Scientology helped me. But the official story is he grew up in Montana. He went to university film school in Canada. Then he dropped out and said, I want to be a pro skater. Moved to San Francisco because that was the area that he knew was kind of like hot for the skating that he liked. Mm-hmm. Then he was really struggling. He had like minor success, some minor sponsorships and stuff, but wasn't making any money. Was valeting cars or whatever. Then all his sponsorships kicked him off, and he was kind of at this low point in his life. And then I feel like him finding Scientology was around then, and him making the Braille YouTubing channel was around then. And he posted his skateboarding videos on super early YouTube, like within a few months. They say days, but I think it was a few months of when YouTube launched. Mm-hmm. And then it got a lot of views and got a lot of attention, and that kind of planted the seed of like, oh, I can be popular on YouTube. And then it all led to running the YouTube business as YouTube progressed.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think at that time he's just finishing a few years of university. So I think he's his early 20s, I think.
And is he now in his early 40s?
Yeah, now I think he's like 41, maybe 41 or 2. I think one.
Mhm. Yeah, that's rough. Cricket Cinema says, why would Scientology not use him as a public celebrity? They don't have a celebrity athlete that I've heard of. Well, Cricket Cinema, I think they do. That's why they put him in publications, is because they want to show, hey, and they did the Scientology video. They definitely hang him out as a, look, we have a celebrity Scientologist, somebody in the skateboarding world.
Yeah. So what's interesting with that is like what I said, how San Francisco Scientology Instagram used to post and follow him, and then there was like a clear distinction when they stopped. I really feel like he kind of said to them like, "Hey, I don't want to do that anymore," or something. So it's like what you said. He seems easygoing and goes along with whatever's happening. That's kind of interesting that he decided to say to them, "Actually, no, you can't do this." Or I expect we can speculate on that, I guess.
Yeah, or it was creating too many issues. The funny thing is, from a Scientology viewpoint, that would be seen as, again, you're a potential trouble source. Like, why are you not standing up and yelling this from the rooftops? Liz Gale says, I genuinely think that Devin and Kyro both had to undergo some sort of ethics cycle and both went full-time Scientology around the same time. That is interesting, Liz Gale. So if a Scientologist gets in trouble, and they want to do those upper levels, joining staff, opening a mission goes a long way in correcting whatever it was you did where you got in trouble with Scientology in the first place. There was a Scientologist he lived in Clearwater. He joined staff in Austin. And he had been I think he was a chiropractor before, and he got involved in some fraud and he lost his license. Well, that's bad public relations for Scientology. So before they would let him on these operating Thetan levels, they basically were like, you got to do something big to contribute. So he joined staff in Austin, which was weird. I did a whole video about it because I thought it was really shady. And the Attorney General's office in Georgia happened to watch my video and reached out to me, and they're like, hey, where did this because I shared a video of him talking about how much money he made and how successful he was financially. Well, meantime, he had been telling the state of Georgia he had no money. He had no money. He can't pay these judgments against him. Yeah. And so I did this whole affidavit for it, and he ended up having a really big judgment by the end of last year. So, but it kind of shows you how Scientologists fall into this trap of this pressure by Scientology to do more. If you give more, you'll get more. You'll be bigger. I mean, they're so hype.
Yeah.
Did any members of his family do an intervention with him? Animal Audit Corner. Not that I'm aware of. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I went and spent a little bit of time with his family. We went to his hometown on like a skateboarding trip once, and most of the guys, we stayed at the house. I don't know, outside looking in, it seemed like he hadn't seen his parents much in the last few years, and they were all like pretty distant or whatever. Like it seemed like they all loved each other and stuff, but maybe they were kind of like disapproving of his lifestyle kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how I would contact them. Maybe I say to them, yo, now he's ruining his life. Like, let's get an intervention going.
Yeah. I mean, if there are enough people who care about him, if he would listen, but it can be done with a lot of care. I just don't know, because he doesn't seem to really stand up to Scientology. Like eventually what ends up happening with a lot of us, like myself included, like I'm pretty chill. But once I got pushed to a certain point and then something just snapped. For me, I was in a mall shooting and I was hiding in the back of this Journey store while this was going on. And all I could think of was, I got to leave Scientology. If I died right now, I've spent my entire life, because I was already having doubts. I already wanted to leave. But it's overwhelming to leave when you're talking about risking losing your entire family. And in that moment, while I was hiding out, I thought, I don't care anymore. As long as I take my children, I don't care if my husband leaves me. I don't care if I never see my mom again. Of course I cared, But I realized, like, I don't want to have my life end this way. And it lit a fire within me that something snapped, and I was willing to, first try and get my family, as many family members out as I could, but I was never going to back down from Scientology. And again, it's like they forget. You can't raise us and indoctrinate us to be like these, kind of get it, get it, get it, don't back down, nothing scares us people, and not expect us to, turn it back on you. I don't get why they continue to not see that coming. But Kyro sounds more, he sounds like genuinely like he's a nicer person, and that would be harder to do. But I just hope that he gets to that point.
Yeah, that's crazy that your one was such a traumatic, like negative thing occurring, and you just said, you know what, actually, tipping point. That's really interesting. Because I would imagine, like, if you're in a kind of a routine of life, it would be hard to like really have that whoa, because you just, like what you said, the temperature of the pot is slowly going up and up and up.
Yeah, and you stand to lose everything. But you get to a point, and I've talked to other former Scientologists about this, like, what was your breaking point? There were a million reasons why I should have left Scientology. And had there been an organization like we have now there's actually 2 organizations that help people after leaving Scientology, the SPTV Foundation and the Aftermath Foundation. And had that existed when I first left the Sea Org, I strongly believe I would have gotten out then. But when I left the Sea Org, I had nothing. Yeah. And so I depended on my family, who were Scientologists. And then, I just got kind of sucked back in. It's all that I knew. And you're not just working like with these feelings of, what they make you do or what the abuses that they cover up, but that brainwashing that it's your fault. The victim blaming in Scientology is so strong. They told us as Sea Org members, L. Ron Hubbard said, if you leave the Sea organization, you are a degraded being. And a degraded being in Scientology is like, well, it's like what it sounds like. It's just the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to push back against.
But yeah, like what you said, when you left, it's like you're going into the pure darkness, and a pre-internet age too. You can't even Google pathway to quitting Scientology. It's just like pure nothing. And then now, like, is Aftermath is Leah Remini's, and then SPTV is like Aaron Smith, Levin, and you guys working together. If you can provide them like this path and say like, hey, I know everything's terrible, but there is a possible way. Like, look at this place, look at what these other people have done. Yeah. Then it becomes a little more like possible, I guess.
Yeah, and it's why I called my channel Life After a Cult, because even though I talk a lot about Scientology, I also talk about life afterwards. Like my life after Scientology has been not free of ups and downs, but it's been amazing. Like I wake up, I have so much gratitude in my heart for the freedom to read a book in the middle of the day if I want, to basically make my own choices. And they sound like such little things, but when you did not have the freedom to do what you wanted when you wanted, when you finally get that, it's, for me anyways, every day I'm almost giddy about it. Like, not in a cult.
Yeah.
I get to talk to whoever I want.
Yeah.
There are a ton of questions, but what's your time like? We've been at this for a little while.
Yeah, we can go for like a bit more and try to get to as many as we can.
Good. Okay, you tell me, because my next one had to cancel. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll back here. We did that one. Did Aaron, this is from Growing Up in Scientology, did Kyro try to explain why he wasn't able to talk to you guys while he was at Flag?
No, he never did. A lot of the relationship to Scientology is like what I would say is Aaron would say vague things. Even this business school, someone comes to your employees and say, I'm going to business school. All of us know he's not going to business school. All of us know, we don't know the specifics of what he's doing, but we know he's doing something related to Scientology. But I'll admit, none of us pushed back in that thing and said, you're not going to business school, you're going to Scientology. We just say, okay. So like, I guess a lot of the communication was kind of vague. So he would be like, oh, sorry, this happened. Or be like, oh, we can't film on Monday to Friday. And no one would say, why? why can't you take off work? Why do you have to go to Scientology every day?
Yeah.
We would never really, maybe we were too easygoing. Like that's like if I were to do things differently, is it maybe I would be more like argumentative and push back like on all stuff like at all times, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas they just say, oh, you're going to do this? And then we go, okay. So yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. And you can do it with love too. You know, there's a former Scientologist who shared that there were people protesting Scientology, and this one guy said to her a few times very calmly, if you're really truly free, why can't you read anything you want? And that stuck with her. And it was kind of the beginning of her kind of going, well, wait a minute. He had to ask it like 3 times when he would see her, but it made an impact. And she was like, whoa, like, wait a minute. Yeah, why? And it's kind of human nature, right? To you, like, you're not going to tell the guy, like, push back too much. But you're right. When people do ask questions, but you can do it from a place of love, it forces, from a Scientology viewpoint, that, you know, it shakes them up a little bit. Like, oh yeah, why? Why can't I? I liken it to, you know, if you got somebody in your life who struggles with addiction, and there's a point where you got to recognize, what are you doing to enable this addiction? Are you making it easier for this person to abuse by covering up for them, right? Is it a codependency type of situation? And I've seen a similar pattern with Scientologists and their family and friends who are not, where they don't want to lose them completely to Scientology. And so they go along with a lot that doesn't feel right. But sometimes if you can push back and question, but with love, not in a way that's angry or antagonistic, it will at least cause them to think. And sometimes it breaks through a little bit of that brainwashing.
Yeah.
Itchy Thetans wants to know, do you think Aaron Cairo is being groomed to take over sheer little Captain Davy from the fake Space Navy? I don't think so. I'm going to make the assumption that Aaron Cairo has probably got a fair amount of debt, and you can't go into the Sea organization with a bunch of debt. So I don't think so, unless, yeah. I mean, they joined staff, they didn't join the Sea Org. That would be a big push. Richie, thank you so much for the super sticker. Do we think Braille's partnership with the Lighthouse for the Blind was genuine, or just a way for Kyro to justify paying people dirt cheap?
Yeah, I can talk on that. I don't know, like, I joined this late in the game, so some of the stuff I don't know fully about. But my understanding of this, it was Lighthouse for the Blind owned the warehouse that the Braille skate park was in. They had one bay, Braille had the other bay. And then they had some kind of, I don't know if it was like a government incentive or if it was by them, that if they hired a disabled worker, I guess specifically blind, maybe, the rent would be like half price or whatever. They'll get a big discount on the rent. And then they hired this lady. I can't remember her name. But they hired this lady, and you know, she would just kind of hang out and just do whatever. Like, I'm not sure if she had any kind of like responsibilities or whatever, but they hired her, and she would just occasionally do stuff. And then that was kind of why they had such a good deal on the warehouse for a really long time. Then the Lighthouse sold it to another company, and then all those deals went away. And then the rent went up as well with COVID, and that's kind of why it like ended up shutting down. But yeah, I think it was definitely legitimate. I don't think there's any reason to think that it was. I mean, like, he was definitely doing it for the cheaper rent, but it wasn't like really malicious or whatever.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know anything about that. Let's see. Days Visions, don't know if this was answered already, but with someone like Kyro that's pretty high up in Scientology, if they tried to leave, would there be any violent repercussions because of what he knows? I would say no. I mean, if you talk, huh?
My audio might change right now. Okay. I have to plug in my thing.
Oh, no worries. I don't think there would be any, if you're talking physical violence, physical violent repercussions against Kyro for leaving. No, I don't think that would be a thing. I think that's something that Scientology wised up to over the years, that especially today, because how do you get away with it now? Violent in terms of mentally and emotionally, oh yeah, If they cannot convince Aaron Cairo to stay through intimidation, brainwashing tactics, they will resort to threats of exposing him. They will go through his files. Scientology keeps files on everybody. And in Scientology, you do a lot of confessing of what Scientology calls your overts. And it's all written down. And what ends up happening is that gets used against you later if you are going to leave, where they're going to say, well, we're actually, we're going to expose that you did this in the past. And that is a tactic to control people often. That's a great question.
I'm just gonna change one thing with my audio, and I'm just gonna use the restroom real quick.
No problem.
Maybe you can keep doing the questions, and I'll just be back in like 2 minutes.
No problem.
Okay.
There's a question for you here, Ricky, from Does It Matter to You, Not to Me? Would you be interested in protesting or confronting Kyro at the San Francisco org? Club Brain Fog is out there almost daily, and she's a total sweetheart.
Yeah, see, that's the my initial pause of do I really want to kind of go down this I don't know, anti-Scientology direction, was I don't know if I want that level of I don't know, exposure maybe.
Yeah. No, and I feel I agree with that.
I would be open to saying to Kyro or Kyro's family, hey, let's do an intervention. I would be more on that side rather than the confronting side, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And can you hear me all right? I had to change my battery was running out. Okay, great.
No, I can hear you. I think that would be more impactful than confronting him out there, because that's more aggressive, and it just doesn't seem like that's even your personality. But the intervention route can be very impactful. Yeah. And then, if you ever felt like it, even just being outside there, because there's Club Brain Fog, he can just stand there and not say anything. I would be curious, though, as to what they would do. What level of, you literally did nothing but stand outside. That would be funny. But I totally support what you're saying. And that's the thing is people, we don't want to, in when it comes to exposing Scientology and high control groups, we also don't want to become the thing that we push back against. I've protested at multiple Scientology locations, but I'm a former Scientologist. It's not for everybody. But that would be funny. Kraken says, and that draining of energy right there is a physiological abuse and, in my opinion, terroristic design. So we were talking about how what Scientology will do if they cannot control you and get you to stay, they will do things to mentally try to mess you up so you don't have the energy and the wherewithal to do battle with Scientology or to expose it. They will attempt to break you down to the point that you just want to leave. They did that with me when I left the Sea Organization. And it took me a long time to do enough healing to get to the point where I could push back again. But when I did, and again, it was a game changer. So I understand that. They do that. They did it to my mom. My mom shared with me when she started questioning them in her Scientology auditing, they started doing and saying things to her that she pretended like everything's fine and great, and she got out of there. So the mental manipulation is no joke. Club Brain Fog says that Kyro doesn't live in San Francisco. He lives in East Bay, which is a lot cheaper. He commutes into San Francisco.
Yeah, I've been to his house before. It was just kind of like a modest-ish house in a kind of a nicer part of East Bay.
Yeah, still expensive out there. Irina says Scientology's reaction to Kyro leaving depends if he would leave quietly and not speak out, or would he speak out? If he spoke out, they would go after him, trying to silence him. They would, but there's not much they can do these days. What are they going to do? Talk crap about him on the internet? I mean, he's already getting that. I don't really think there's much. Scientology will not take any legal action because they learned their lesson. When you put former Scientologists on the stand, we welcome it because that's a great opportunity for us to share the abuses that happened that we witnessed. and they don't like it. And they learned their lesson with a former Scientologist where they did that. They tried to sue her. She ran Scientology in Clearwater, actually, in Florida. Her name was Debbie Cook. And she got on the stand and she shared that David Miscavige had her and other Scientology executives locked in a double wide trailer. They put bars on the window. They posted a guard
Yeah.
outside.
Damn.
They put her in a garbage can and dumped water over her while calling her a lesbian, with people calling someone to hit her because she dared to question David Miscavige. And many of the people who were there, it was called The Hole. They have since left and turned whistleblower. Mike Rinder, who passed away earlier this year, wrote a book about it, his firsthand experience in The Hole. And he was a Scientology spokesperson for over 20 years. And he was physically beaten by David Miscavige multiple times.
Damn. I actually didn't know Mike Rinder passed away, but I read Mike Rinder's, or his initial book, or one of his books. And now I actually listened to the audiobook. I think it was like 14 hours or something. And I thought that was very interesting, how he's kind of telling his escape and like all that kind of stuff. Because he's Australian as well. Like, I'm Australian.
That's right. Yeah, very much so. Renegade says sleep deprivation is used as a brainwashing technique. That is very true. Chuck Ross wants to know, do you think Kyro saw the South Park episode?
That's an interesting question. Do we know roughly what year that came out? I feel like it would have been before Kyro joined.
Yeah. When did do you remember when he joined?
I think he would have joined in around sort of like the early 2000s. So I guess like maybe like the 7, 8, 9. I think there's a record of him doing some Scientology around there. So like a bit before whenever he did it, I guess.
So November 2005 is when that episode aired. Which
yeah, he might have
been before he got into Scientology.
He might have.
Arkansas Flamingo points out Laura Prepon didn't speak out for years for that reason. So she was on that 70s show. She played Donna. She loved Scientology, but never said a word about it. Still hasn't. I wish she would. I really wish she would. Oh, here's a good one from Roach. In Kyro's recent video, he is responding to people in the comments questioning him by saying, "What did I do? What are you talking about? Is that short story?" and believing he's not wrong. Are you familiar with those comments?
Sorry, it cut a little bit there. What was that last question?
That he is responding to comments on YouTube saying, "What did I do?"
Just the last part. I'm sorry. Yeah, I can speak on that. It's weird. Like, I know a few of the other Scientology Braille stuff that weren't the skaters would be in the comments too, and occasionally you'll see them talk in like third person and say he instead of saying like I, because it's meant to be like Aaron Cairo's channel. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that's so strange. And he said, "What did I do exactly?" I seen actually in one of the recent videos, he said like I should talk more about what happened or something, but like I don't really know what he's gonna say, because like he basically can't, like I was saying, he's the rock in the hard place. He can't really tell the truth, or he can't really say. So like I don't know. It's weird that he would comment vague stuff. Like, what was the purpose of that? Just don't comment anything. So I don't know why they do that.
Yeah. You know, I want to let your audience know too, like if they have any other questions on Scientology, they're always welcome. I can be reached, Natalie at lifeafteraccult.com. And they're welcome to come on anytime too and ask questions in the chat or when I'm doing videos. I think one of the biggest messages for me is I hope that people understand that Scientology is not just another choice. It's not just it's just another religion. It's just like you get to choose. It's like, no, it's deeper than that. And much of what I shared with you, these multiple abuses that start at the top, are that, that is why. At the same time, I hope that people understand that I'm not against Scientologists. I'm against the abusive practices within Scientology and wanting to stop that. And if individual Scientologists knew the half of it and the lies that we were told about who L. Ron Hubbard really was, they would feel differently, but they're not exposed to that. So when you hear these stories and you hear my story, and it's very upsetting and alarming because it should be, but recognize these everyday Scientologists don't know that. They're not allowed to know it. And when it happens to them, they can't talk to anybody about it, and they're convinced that it only happened to them. When things happen to me in
Yeah.
Scientology, I thought it was only happening to me. Then I left and found out. So maintaining that compassion is important as well. I don't want people, if you want to protest Scientology, learn more about it, that's fantastic. But try to remember that many of the members you're going to encounter are people who do want to help. And they are under a lot of mind control and brainwashing and don't know what everybody listening right now learned more about the truth of Scientology than an everyday Scientologist will know about. They just don't know. So try to still have some compassion when approaching them. And even Aaron Cairo.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think, because I feel like the questions can keep coming. There's even more, but we have been out this for a while, but I would love to sit down
totally.
and revisit. And, if your audience even has more questions, I'm absolutely happy anytime to answer those and hopefully bring some of that perspective of understanding that, but also not creating hate at the same time.
Yeah, totally. I think this was like the most kind of like humanizing and empathetic kind of like coverage that we had. And I think it's really interesting to sort of just to share your perspective because, like Aaron Carey's making all these bad decisions, but still it's rooted in his dedication to Scientology. And as a dedicated Scientologist, it's like you were previously this, in a similar state as he's in right now. Right. So
yeah,
I think it's been really eye-opening. The honestly, the biggest thing for me is that Devin is opening the mission. To me, that's crazy. It seems like such a bad time with all this happening. I definitely want to learn more about that.
Yeah. And it might be part of some handling she had to do in Scientology to make up the damage, make up some amends. There's no way that Aaron Cairo's walking away scot-free with the public relations nightmare that's happening all around him. Scientology will hold him responsible for that at some point to some degree. So it's interesting to me that he's in the comments on his own channel, which makes me want to go check that out.
Yeah, I mean, the videos are really sad too. Like now he's the way he's talking in the video, just fully ignoring everything, pretending it's the glory days. Like, oh, what board do you guys skate? 8775 or 825? It's like, oh, bro, like it's really, I don't know. It's really sad, to be honest.
Yeah, that's kind of the elephant in the room, and not acknowledging it can backfire completely. And he will continue to try to do that. And I don't doubt that that is the advice he's getting. Oh, just ignore it. They're just haters. It's like, no, these were your people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my chat is all saying like, thank you so much. It was really lovely to hear your perspective. They're all very receptive. And yeah, command Natalie for the YouTube channel. And like she said, you can reach her on the email on her channel as well with any questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll see how my anti-Scientology journey is going. Maybe we can do something again.
Yeah, I would love it. And again, it's about the abusive practices, not about the people. There are people who perpetuate those abuses, but the vast majority are victims of Scientology themselves, and they just don't know because they're not allowed to know. I appreciate so much that you did this, and I let my audience know that, Ricky Glaser Reacts, which is where there's quite a few videos on there responding to the Sunny V2 video. I love the reaction you did on my video and Aaron Smith loving it growing up on Scientology's video. I love that. And anytime your audience wants to come hang out and experience some aloha, and we have a lot of fun too, because it's educating about Scientology and cults, but we try to laugh at the absurdities of all of it, because if it's boring, I don't want to do it, and I want to have fun.
Yeah, totally. And I think they will be interested to come and talk more about Kyro and Braille and Steve Barron, maybe even Jason Lee or stuff like that too. So yeah, I think that they are definitely interested in the skateboarder side as well, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. If you haven't already hit like and subscribe, y'all, please do that. I'm sure we will talk more again later. Thank you so much for doing this.
Okay, guys.
Give me one
Everybody,
sec now.
I hope y'all get out
Thank
and
you.
have an amazing cult-free day.